What you're about to hear is from my introduction to Emmanuel Levinas's Totality and Infinity course. These lectures were done to be accessible to people who have not done the reading. If you are interested in diving in deeper, doing the reading, or want access to the deep dives into my notes and the questions concerning translation, then you will want to become a subscriber to my ongoing research seminar. I can save all of that extra content for people who really want to dive in deeper. This lecture is meant to be a lot more accessible. Subscribers to the seminar get lectures I do with my wife Anne, but they also get access to my deep dives into Das Kapital, Being in Time, and Totality and Infinity, as well as a bunch of other works related to critical media theory, critique of political economy, and the foundations of time energy theory. You can learn more about becoming a subscriber in the description down below. And part 2 of Totality and Infinity course is going to kick off in January 2025. With that, I hope you enjoy this lecture. All right, welcome. Okay, so this is week 2. This is a little sort of preamble to the lecture. I hope somebody in the future will timestamp the point at which the lecture begins. For now, for those who just want to watch it from beginning through the lecture, what we're about to dive into here is having Nance and Will share out what was just discussed in the back rooms of the breakout rooms. Breakout rooms means that everybody here was divided up into 2 groups. I was not present for either group, and everybody is responding to a basic question or a set of questions opened up by, what if you are starting late in this course? What if you are feeling overwhelmed? What if there's too much going on? And I'm not saying that Ian was feeling overwhelmed. I mean, I would feel overwhelmed. Ian said, "Oh, it's no worries. I'll catch up." And I was like, "Yeah, that's good, but I still want to give everybody a shot to kind of share their own advice. You know, what have we covered? How would you approach it? Because there's a lot of ways of going about it. So let's start with Will, since his was not recorded and it's fresh for him. So let's go.
Yeah, so we mainly just started talking about how you've got to be prepared to be overwhelmed by the text, because the text will overwhelm you. It gets very poetical, so it's a lot of it's about letting it wash over you and kind of just keeping on going. And I think Cesar was talking about, you're going to need to do kind of like a spiral reading thing with this. You know, as much as you go through, you're going to have to come back to sections. Things are going to get illuminated. So it's, yeah, I think overall it was not a casual read. I think maybe Anne said that maybe being in time might help just to get you to start thinking about being, but it might also confuse you. So, you know, either way with that, I suppose, depends if you really want to go into that first. And I suppose one of the big things is to play the believing game with it and with the discussions that we have. That was a big one. That was a big one, because you are going to need to do that. And then just more importantly, how the text is kind of important for our contemporary landscape, especially obviously with the elections coming up and things like this. Anne was talking about this specifically, about how important this is for now. And you're going to be surprised about how contemporary the text feels and what it seems to be saying about our current moment. And then I think there was a couple of other more interesting parts about, you know, not using philosophy to completely overpower people, which is something that this text will help you do. It really does help you kind of understand the background of time energy a little bit as well. Is as I've started reading it, I've been like, oh, this is why this and things like that. But in terms of where to start, obviously with the first lecture, I think the preface was a great place. I really understood everything after David done that lecture on the preface. And then also, I think Anne said there's session A, I think it was, the one that you, Dave and Nance did, I think on the Thursday. That one is really, really good. There's some absolute just brilliant pieces in there. So if you're going to watch one of those, I would watch that one. That was the best one. And I think that is it. I'm not sure I've got much else.
Thanks, Will. That's really great. What you got, Nance?
I think similarly, this question of Heidegger, should you read came up, and we decided, maybe not. I think pointing people to 3 principles of study as a way of life, like to remind us, hey, we're diving in the deep end. We're going to drown for a while. The point is not to win the gold medal. The point is to be in the pool. And also, Christopher recommended McLuhan and Levinas on the phone. If you have time to read that piece as like a good entry point familiarization with Levinas, and to kind of combat some of that, the feeling of being overwhelmed, or familiarize yourself with it. And reading On Escape, and similarly watching the preface lecture, and like just coming to it with the intention of like, I want to familiarize myself with it, but I'm also not going to win the world championships of being the expert knower of everything. None of us are. That's not what we're here to do. And like recognizing we're being overwhelmed is a part of the process. And like the question does come up, like, well, should we tell people go through being in time, and go through, we talked about Descartes, like maybe reading a little bit of Descartes beforehand would help. I don't know. Like, I guess people are gonna read and learn and engage at their own pace, and just like always putting that front and center, like, yeah, that's the way to do it. Like you're not here. There is no requirement. You're not going to get an F. You're not going to fail. You're not going to be the laughing stock. Like, no, we're all here together on this shared endeavor. Is that, yeah, that's the way to do it. Like, no one is here to. It's not a competition. Like it's a genuine pursuit of this thing, whatever the hell it is that Levinas is talking about.
Excellent. Good job, everybody. You did it. Now, before I jump into the lecture, I have to switch some things over. And so I'm going to pause. And
recording stopped.
And unpausing. All right. So that's looking good. Okay. Hope you all are able to hear me just fine. Yeah. And so what I wanted to start out with today is something that I feel is like directly relevant. And it's relevant to me in the sense that that it's like it's directly related to the questions that came up in our first session with the community here forming around this text at Theory Underground. The first session was Friday evening, and at least evening in the US. And in it, questions about interpretation and method came up. They're really good questions. They're, in a sort of sense, what Theory Underground is doing, our approach is continental philosophy being done by people who read books like Baptists read books, right? Like, we're assuming that there's a there, and that there is a concrete human being who lived in the world, who's got opinions, who's got flaws, who's got a mission, an actual mission. Levinas, his whole life was spent trying to help us see in this way that is characterized as ethics. This is why he says that ethics is an optics. An optics. Now, maybe it's because Mikey actually comes from like some hardcore Baptist sort of church, and technically, like, my parents were pretty close to that. I never got super into the Bible in that way where I was doing like line by line analyses and practicing apologetics and all that bullshit. I thankfully never did that. To me, I say thankfully to me, I'm happy to be who I am, and who I was never the kind of person who was given over to that. But Mikey was and is sort of in that mode, and he and I connect and disconnect, or at least complement one another, insofar as we agree and then have interesting disagreements when it comes to reading of texts, drawing on authors, thinking about philosophy, thinking about theory. He will be in his first session of his seminar, which starts next week, talking about his approach to philosophy and theory. And like, I'll just short circuit the whole process here without saying what he really thinks. I'm just going to say, like, generally speaking, I think I can speak for me and him and most everyone else to say that we don't get a lot from most other people's lectures or conversations about theory, because all we really see is that they're like sharpening the knives in their own toolkits, that they've got their own agendas. The institutions are teaching you how to fulfill a function in a career path that has its own meaning within a certain kind of field, and it's a field that we do not share with them. As a result of our class position, we're not, our horizon of possibilities and the possible roles that we can fulfill and the kinds of habitus that would arise from trying to fulfill those roles, it's not something that's on our radar. It's not something that we care too much about. And so the overwhelming majority of the kinds of graduate seminars going on at alternative education institutions on the internet are not satisfying our metaphysical desire, which is to go beyond and get outside of the instrumentalization of these texts into certain specific projects or towards certain ends, whether those be careers or just sharpening one's personal toolkit. Like, look, we are doing that. I have a career. I want Mikey to have a career doing this. Like, that is part of it. But there's, for me, for Mikey, there's no option of doing it within academia. For me, I could just really, really try over and over and over again, and over the next 20 years, eventually get tenure. But I don't want to, because if I thought the process would make me into the kind of person that I want to become, so that I'm capable of speaking to the kinds of people that I want to be able to speak to, then I would do it. But I don't see that that process would result in me becoming the kind of person that I want to become, right? The kind of person that I want to become when it comes to engagement with these texts is very Levinasian, right? I think that part of the reason Levinas is so compelling to me, and potentially to a fault, in the ways that I touched on in the first lecture, is because I am kind of just predisposed to being a Levinasian in a sort of sense. I mean, I'm also, there's something about me predisposed towards Marx and Heidegger as well, right? I didn't grab a hold of Whitehead and C.S. Peirce or Spinoza and Leibniz or Plato and Aristotle. Like, they all matter to me. They all matter. But I didn't go with them or Wittgenstein or Quine. No, I went with Marx, Heidegger, Levinas. And of course, I'm fundamentally committed to understanding the current scene, the conjuncture of the moment, the situation. And that is one that's formed between a fundamental fault line, or not between a fundamental fault line, that constitutes a fault line. And that is, on the one side, the Slovenian school, and on the other side, the CCRU, and accelerationisms and speculative realisms and object-oriented ontologies and all of that kind of stuff. That is contemporaneous with our moment. It's timely, it's sexy, it's what everybody wants to talk about. All the thinkers that everybody wants to research are primary for one of those two schools of thought, if not both. But when you hear people who are just completely sold on Deleuze and Guattari, well, you got to remember that they are responding within a scene, within a field that is constituted by this fault line between the CCRU and the Slovenian school. And there's something for them on the D&G side that's not on the other side. Now, of course, you also get people who are based in both pilled, right? They're going to be
100% down for both sides. And a lot of those people are signing up for Mikey's seminar that starts next week. Okay. But this Baptist approach of assuming that there's a there, and it's not religious in the sense of like, God wrote it, God revealed it. But in a sort of sense, it's more like this Levinasian religious sense in which we do assume that the great thinker responsible for the great texts, for authoring the great texts, is smarter than we are, and that what they've contributed, if we spend so much time and energy studying them, we're hedging our bets that they have a staying power that will last thousands of years. Now, for me, the Slavonian school and the CCRU, even if they wouldn't have lasted thousands of years if they were to form, 100 years from now, they will have that staying power because they are there at the dawn of cyber history. They're there at the dawn of cyber history. They have a very important role to play. And all of our salvaging projects of bringing other marginalized thinkers who've not really made it into the meme world, the meme space, or the theory tube, like those kinds of thinkers like Jaspers and Levinas, for instance, or Kierkegaard or Leibniz. Like, if they are to exist in the future on the internet, it will be because internet people, hopefully we are more than just internet people, but we are also that, are going to make them relevant, are going to bring them into dialogue with those sides of that fault line that constitutes our current conjuncture. But this idea that there is a there, that there is an other there, that other is a singular thinker, that thinker has something that I don't, that other is my master in a sort of sense. That sort of like, oh no, I really do care about trying to figure out like what they actually said. That is Levinasian, and it's also what I'm calling this continental Baptist approach, right? Because it is, the Baptists, they do believe, this is revealed truth, revealed by God. Well, I don't believe that Levinas or Heidegger or Marx have revealed the truth of God at all. But I do believe that insofar as they are radically exterior to me and have something to offer that goes far beyond what most other authors, what the overwhelming majority of other authors have to offer when it comes to certain fundamental questions that I take seriously. That's where the point of comparison is. I do believe that's a Levinasian sort of approach, is to say, the master is the one that breaks through my totality. When I'm self-obsessed and self-absorbed and self-satisfied, I still feel stifled and I still want to escape and I want something beyond all of that. And then I go and I read and I read and I read. And what I find is not beyond all of that. It's all reducible to the same. It's all like, oh, you red versus blue. Oh, you said something smart. You said something stupid. You said something true. You said something. And that's great, whatever. But also we want out of it. We want something so outside of the habits of our attention within the attention economy. And outside of our doxa. And outside of the doxa of the current conjuncture, whether that be thought of as the theory scene itself and its fundamental fault line, or if we're talking about, mainstream, post-class fractured mass, 2020 onward times, the times that we were living in, and the sort of mass society that we're all a part of, mass in quotes. This approach says that Levinas has something to offer. Now, the other approach is to say, well, we don't really know anything about Levinas. We're going to just get to the text itself and see what we can do with it. And I do want to say, and I did say this on Friday night, that's not just valid, it's also practical, it's also useful, depending on what your immediate goals are. And so there, you might get more use value from different kinds of readings. But if your goal is to give the devil his due, which is to say, take seriously this author, then you're going to want to read it the way I'm going to recommend, in the way that Levinas would recommend. And this giving the devil his due, there's multiple reasons why one might want to do it. You might want to critique him. Well, if you're going to do that, try to walk in his shoes, try to walk with people who actually think that they've figured out what he was really all about. But also, for me, it's about setting up a council room, like a council chamber, like the conspiracies. Got a bunch of people in a dark room, probably Jewish, smoking cigars. And, well, that's not what I mean at all. What I mean is, what if you had a space in your house that you could go into to commune with the greatest minds in the history of ideas? Not so that you could get them all to pat you on the back and say, yeah, everything you're doing out there, bro, is so good. Give you some hugs and high fives and jack you off under the table, whatever. And then you go back out into the world and you win fights. No, it's so that you could go in there with the questions that drive you. And so that you can get radically opposed perspectives from the greatest minds who thought about things related to these questions. Or maybe in this thinker or that thinker's case, that thinker didn't engage with this fundamental question and therefore makes them very interesting for bringing into conversation with these people who did. Right? Setting up that room, I think it's incumbent upon us to sort of set that room up and not just have this sort of preconceived notion of okay, this is the self-help way. I think maybe Napoleon Hill talks about this, that room, or maybe Wayne Dyer. They're going to say that room would be full of people like Benjamin Franklin and Steve Jobs. And then that those people would give you, advice on how to invest your money or advice on how to exercise and take ice baths at 4:30 in the morning and get your hustle and grind set on so that you can be successful. That's not what I'm talking about. But it is kind of like that because that's just this bastardized, instrumentalized version of what Machiavelli was talking about when he would say that he would go and commune with the ancients every evening after 6 p.m. or whatever. I forget exactly what the quote is, but he would dress up in his finest garments, he's, his Sunday best. And he would go into this special room and he would commune with the ancients, his masters, right? And there is a tendency that we should break away from, and that this more rhetorical approach, I think, is trying to combat. And it's a genuine problem. And that is assuming that the canon is all figured out, that each person within the canon constitutes a definite position, that their authority is something that they just have by right of belonging to the canon, and that has been sanctified by some institution, and that some specialist who spent his life studying them is able to then, from this position of authority, tell you, this is what this person thinks. Your job is to, in the banking model of education, jot down a bunch of notes and say, oh, yes, this is what he says on an exam. And then they go, high five, you've graduated. Cum laude, we'll clap you out of here. And then you go and you get a job somewhere, and potentially you will cite that professor's papers, and he will eventually cite yours back. And then you'll be all part of the same happy family of tenured professors who cite one another at conferences, because if you're not citing one another and actively publishing, then they'll fire your ass. Or you're not going to make it to tenure is the point. That's something we want to combat. We don't want to take everything on authority. We don't want to think that we've got definitive, conclusive, totalized interpretations of a text. But I do believe that there's a pragmatic function that goes along with assuming that the thinker knows what they're talking about, is choosing their words deliberately, and that the words are even less important than the meaning being advanced, and that they might have a meaning that they aim to advance over the course of a few pages, and they're trying to say it in several different ways over the course of those few pages, right? I think that there is a huge advantage to assuming that. I also think it's probably true, but I could be convinced otherwise. But functionally, I think it makes a difference. It's also Levinasian, and so even if we're going to problematize it, and I think we should, and I think that we'll spend the rest of our lives problematizing Levinas. The point, though, is to give him a chance to stand up in the room of these ancients that we want to consult, to give him a chance to stand up and say his piece. And then, of course, we can inquire as to whether we've understood him correctly or not. And then the rest of your life can be spent arguing with him, but you definitely want to spend a period of time playing the believing game, getting the first couple of readings out of the way, getting your imperfect and flawed interpretation together. And then on the basis of that, you can modify it. You can correct for things. You can read secondary literature. You can kind of, I used to think this Hubert Dreyfus way of reading Being in Time, and now I have like this kind of Richard Woolen way of reading it, and then now I have something that's neither of those, right? Well, that comes from these multiple readings. And as far as method and the question of method goes at Theory Underground, the general approach that I take is spelled out in 3 Principles of Study as a Way of Life, the article that is on Substack. I highly recommend it. Definitely read it if you have not. And in it, we talk about the Mikey standard, the Brian standard, the Burt standard, not in that order. And that basically comes to this idea of like reading and not really knowing what's going on and being open to kind of whatever, but also trying to, you're going to want to take other people at their word as far as like what's going on. And then on the follow-up, you kind of come through to see, okay, what is this saying? Like, does this confirm my hunch from last time? And then on the third reading, you compare it with everything you know, and you critique it. Now, most texts don't warrant 3 readings. Even if they do warrant 3 readings, they might not warrant 3 readings from you. You have limited time energy. But in terms of your limited time energy, you are better off reading Marx, Heidegger, Levinas, their main works, 3 times than you are in reading all of the works of philosophy just 1 time. And the reason is because you want to strike roots into the life of the mind, right? Strike roots. And try to strike roots where there is a community of disagreement already, where there are people who've been interpreting it for a couple hundred years already, ideally. In the case of Levinas and Heidegger, it's not a couple hundred years yet, but you want these thinkers to have time to breathe and for the interpretive communities to form and split, and for these paradigm shifts within the field to emerge, right? Because then you can test your own knowledge against people who are specializing in these texts. But because we're not specialists, because we're not academics, because we are underground theorists, we have a tremendous advantage in some ways, big disadvantage in other ways, mainly time, energy, and lack of institutional supports. But our advantage is that we don't have to specialize, and we don't have to read all of the secondary literature. We actually can have an originary confrontation with the primary sources of a set of thinkers, and then do it again and do it again. And then eventually, a decade later, come around and maybe look at some of these articles in some journals. But of course, before then, there will be people like Todd McGowan and Terrence Blake who say, hey, you've got this one way of reading this text, or you're trying to bring these 2 thinkers together. Have you seen this article? You might want to look at this article. It might even change your position. And you go, oh my God, that's great. And then instead of just looking and perusing all of the journals, you've actually got experts who are saying, hey, I love what you're doing. Check out this article. What do you think about that? And look, guys, we're on the outside in terms of academia. We're on the outside. And that means that we actually don't have a responsibility to read all the secondary literature first. We don't have a responsibility to do anything. We're doing this because we love it. And what is it that we love? It's getting to the pure and uncut, the straight fucking, whether it's cocaine or ganja, whatever I'm going for as a metaphor here, it's the pure and uncut, right? It's the primary. Now, of course, translated into English, it's always already a little cut. It's already a little removed. But also the people who translate it spend so much time looking at the different interpretations and thinking about it. What are you going to say there, Nance?
I mean, it being in any language, even the primary language of the author itself, it's already diluted. Already.
Right. But that's where it becomes useful to kind of just dispense with or bracket out questions of like what the real meaning, what the authentic, true meaning of a text is. And instead we'll just say, well, what's it doing for us today? What's it doing for you? Nance, what did it do for you? Cesar, what's it doing for you? That's great. But also, I think that there is in terms of time energy, something to be gained from assuming that prior to the body of dead letters in the text, whether they be French or English translated, prior to those actual words on the page was a living, breathing thinker who probably spent anywhere between a month and 20 years obsessing over questions and doing research that concludes in this expression of these expressed dead letters. And so if there's some kind of a rhythm, some kind of a structure, some kind of coherent vision that comes out of that you are getting at the level of the expressed dead letters, the signifiers on the page, and that does something for you, great. But also, I think there we want to try to approximate together as a community of truth seekers coming from our radically different backgrounds and levels of experience. That there is the living, breathing human being who committed his entire life to thinking like a wave on a beach about a specific experience, a specific question, and the specific set of problems opened up by that loving, passionate, and justified obsession. Okay, so that's kind of like my opening remarks, but it's going to be the topic of the rest of this lecture because it turns out that it's actually the theme of these first, 105 pages, right? And actually, 33 through 105. It's the theme of 33 through 105. I'm not even going to get into part D because I got so obsessed with going back over parts A through C. But part D is only like 2 pages long anyway, so we'll touch on it next time. But I want to start off with something funny, and actually, Nance, I'm going to share it with you in email right now so that you can share it into the chat. And then and just take the first big chunk of it, not the second distinct paragraph that starts with "I hope to inspire." Leave that out. Just copy and paste everything else and drop that into the chat so people can follow along. I wish we could put it up on the screen, but it would take too much extra work. I'm not going to do that. So Boise State University is all about cutting edge technology and new marketing schemes and expanding their football program, of course, like every neoliberal university. Part of that is treating the student like a customer. And one of the results of this is, it turns out that, Brian and Becky with their giant Stanley mugs and their Uggs and tank tops and hangovers at 9 a.m. They're not interested in a lecture from somebody who's a master in a field. They would just like if we all just played games, guys. And so then they have like this Center for New Teaching Techniques at Boise State. And I took, something like 7 to 10 of these workshops with teachers. And so I would go to these things and I was surrounded by other professors and instructors and, adjuncts, whatever, graduate students, teaching assistants. Everyone was taking these these courses, and I became somewhat familiar with the different people who were teaching them. So the Center for New Teaching Techniques was all about like, okay, well, yeah, you could tell people something and then like test their knowledge on it, but that's just the banking model, the banking model, like Paulo Freire. But like, what about like student-centered learning that understands there's a variety of teaching methods? Some work different for different people, and there's a lot of different learning styles, and that we should instead center and try to be inclusive of as many of those learning styles as possible. And that means that we can't just stick to the lecture format. We actually want to play games with people. So like we'll actually have people, and what it basically turns into is you get to find out in the time of the semester length of a course, you get to find out a lot about the personalities of the different people in the room. You get to find out a lot about their identities and their personalities. You get to find out about like the kinds of answers they give certain kinds of questions, the ways that they play, nicely or not with other people in their group, the ways that they take on responsibilities in those groups. And that's the main thing you'll learn. If you ask everybody to read a book and then come and discuss it next week, you're going to learn a lot about how 19 out of those 25 students are able to communicate about something that they haven't read. You're going to learn a lot about that, but you're not going to learn a lot about that text. You'll actually end up being like, wait, did I read the same thing? And be really confused. And then like the person who's read it multiple times is going to end up going over it all again, being like, how did people come up with all this other bullshit? And then it's just like, oh my God, you're just being gaslit by a bunch of ignoramuses that are, like I said, 20-year-olds who are hungover. And it's like, God bless your souls. They're doing the progressive Rumspringa. We support it, man, whatever. People got to get it out of their system. But it's absolutely insane. And it's why I thought that the process of a tenure track would turn me into someone I didn't want to be. Now, engaging with the attention economy also turns me into somebody I don't always want to be, but we counter various tendencies, and having you all here in a room and doing hybrid events and having met lots of you in person and planning on meeting a lot of you this October, that's a way of countering it. Planning on doing a tour in June of 2025 is a way of countering it. The fact that so many of you are already planning to see us in Ohio in March when we go to the LAC conference. I say that like a lot of you are already planning it. Too many people in the scene are already going to be there. Not that many Theory Underground people actually know that that's happening. Mikey's going to be there. And when Mikey announced that he was going to be there, to me and Nance and a couple other people, I think he might have announced it on social media, all of a sudden he's got all kinds of other people like, I'm going to be there. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be there. And so all these people are really excited to be at the LAC conference. And Nance and I are like chief among those, of course. You're all obviously invited as participants, as presenters, or just as attendees. And so, think about it. Of course, if you have to be choosy, there's TUCon 2024. That's going to be important. There's the actual tour and conference in June of 2025. But hey, if March works better, or if you can do it all, then, we look forward to seeing you in March at the LAC conference. I'll be presenting, hopefully. I think Mikey will be presenting. If I can extort a presentation out of Nance, he'll be presenting. But first, we'd have to convince him that he's worthy. And that's an uphill battle, But the reason I bring up this material possibility of breaking through the algorithm and being in the meat space together is because we're trying to counter certain tendencies of the process of doing this kind of thing online that makes us into something that we don't want to be. Right. Now, the reason I started off with this whole conversation about method and our approach is because it is a response to a real situation, and it's raising real questions, and it's getting me to really think, and insofar as I take someone seriously, I will respond. And at the point that I can't take them seriously anymore, I'll stop responding. And then if I can't stop thinking about it at some point, then I go, actually, I can't not think about it. And then I'll bring it back at some point. And that's how I am on the internet. It's why I'm so easily trolled. It's because I'll take it seriously up to a certain point. And so it's like the new methodological approach that I've been trying to adopt over the last like year is to assume the best about everybody, but just as well, like they might just be trolling or schizophrenic or, whatever, a robot. It doesn't matter. Like there's a sort of Turing test that I have to do that can only be proven out over time. And the Turing test is to like, can the robot convince the human that it is human? Okay. Well, the McKerracher test is an upgrade on that. And instead of it being, can the human prove they're not a robot? It's, can they prove that they're not a broken, can they prove they're not irrevocably broken or a child? Can they prove that they're trying to pull their pants up, tighten their belt, put on their serious face, have a real conversation? And going with the principle established in my Waypoint book, maturity is thinking that everything has to be instant. Immaturity is thinking everything has to be instantaneous. Maturity is giving things time. And then if we don't have time to do that, understanding that if we don't have time, then we really don't have time to act like we don't have time. And so ultimately my filter, this McKerracher test filter, is to kind of just give everyone time to get to know me and for them to give me time to get to know them. Because people who stick around for as long as Nance or Cesar at this point, I go, okay, I'm getting the vibe. Will, I'm getting the vibe. Christopher, I'm getting the vibe, right? You've been around, you've left, you've come back, or you've only been around for a couple months, but I'm starting to get a sense for you outside of a couple of performances, because every time you meet somebody, that person has a choice of to be very welcoming or to be very this way or that way, shy, whatever. There's a lot of different ways that a person can perform. Maybe it doesn't feel like performance. Maybe they think they're being authentic, but in a sort of sense, we always choose how we enter into a relationship with others. And if we aren't choosing it, then we just haven't matured yet. And I haven't matured yet. I am on this process of maturation. Like I'm in this process of maturation. I have goals to be someone worthy of speaking to a generation that does not exist, that will belong to my children's generation. Like my children will belong to a generation. That's ultimately the generation that I would like to write to. I'm going to write to them when they're about the age of 25. And everything until then is just a process of preparation for that. And part of that is being able to write to their parents at the time that I'm becoming a parent. Like this whole thing of like, it's trying to short circuit certain tendencies of the academic and attention economy scenes, and how we think about peer groups and generations and our audience. And it's all an approach that I talk about in the introduction to Waypoint, actually. And so Theory Underground was something birthed from a bunch of operating assumptions established there, as well as principles. I mean, in a sort of sense, a principle is an operating assumption, but that's a bigger question. Now, the process that I don't want to go through, and the kind of person that I don't want to become, and the ways that we are experimenting with all of this stuff and the tendencies that we're trying to counter, it's going to be very different if we're talking about the attention economy or we're talking about the academic scene. And I was trying to give you all a sense for where the academic scene is at in my neck of the woods when talking about Boise State University. I love and cherish so many people who are there. And so none of this should reflect on human beings. I don't even think that in a lot of cases humans are responsible for what's going on. It's definitely lemurs from the future. They're doing the work of neoliberalizing the university. But outside of those damn lemurs, there is the sort of like acclimation process of being an instructor who sits in these like new teaching technique classrooms, and then being like, wow, this is the reason everyone's teaching in this way that I find so unfulfilling. And then you go online and you search out lectures, and then you find out the lectures that you purchased aren't even lectures and are actually just more discussion groups, more of the same. That process is something that I want to combat. And not combat just for the sake of the lulz or the adrenaline or the, oh, look at how great I am, but because I feel betrayed. I feel like $60,000 of debt that I went into to get my master's degree, as well as my bachelor's and associate's degrees. As the first person in my family to go to college when everyone told me it would be a waste of money, when everybody in my life hadn't gone to college and was like doing fine without going to college, I was convinced there's something that the university has to offer me, and there's something there. There's a there. And then all of a sudden I'm surrounded by people who are like, well, yeah, maybe there's a there, but if it is, then you can tell me about it. And I was like, you're the one who studies this. Can you just teach this class? Right? So yeah, I've got an axe to grind when it comes to that stuff. It's a $60,000 debt axe to grind. And if anybody wants to pay it off, I promise I won't be mad anymore. But for now, I'm sorry. Like, what I'm doing here is what I wish the university had got me to do before I was bestowed upon with like this master's degree, right? And so in my desire to combat this tendency, and by the way, if anybody's like, well, how is this going to help me with totality and infinity? Should I skip ahead? Everything that follows is based in the context of what I'm saying here. But this is kind of the segue. There's a lightning lecture talk proposal opportunity given out by this teaching center a couple times, like once a year or something like that. And these lightning talks are 5-minute talks that educators are able to give to their colleagues about things that they've learned in the classroom that they find to be really useful, but also elaborations on or demonstrations of a teaching theory. And I received, because I was a discussion leader, teacher's assistant type person last year, which I had been out of the university for a few years at that point, after my master's. And so I was like, oh, this is a cool opportunity. Yeah. So I was doing this discussion leading thing, and I received this opportunity to submit a proposal. And remember how I said, like, they're doing this sort of Paulo Freire knockoff, like, oh, we're combating the banking model of education where knowledge is just deposited into the person and then that person has to regurgitate it. Well, of course, I've got a problem with that. Everyone has a problem with that, I think. But how they combat it's an issue. And so what I wanted to do was give a 5-minute talk. And so what I'm going to read off is the title and the goal, and then I'll have Nance read the part that I am hoping he shared there. So the working title is Levinas' Ethics of Infinity versus Freirean Politics in the Classroom. And I said, my goal is to present the following abstract in 5 minutes in a way that is accessible to a 5-year-old. All right, Nance, take it away.
On humanizing education, it is not enough to go beyond treating one's students as objects or to embrace the whole student. Paulo Freire was influenced heavily by Martin Buber and Ivan Illich, two essential thinkers for going beyond the reductive and instrumentalized relationship. However, what none of them were exposed to was the even more radical work of Emmanuel Levinas, the thinker of the other par excellence. I want to challenge the Freirean priority of politics over ethics using Levinas. What Levinas theorizes as the face-to-face relationship is the foundation of ethics, as well as all other disciplines or fields of inquiry. Using Levinas, I will show that the pedagogical relationship is always asymmetrical, regardless of whether we implement modern teaching practices or not. This asymmetrical relationship should call into question our tendency to totalize the subject matter, syllabus, and students for political purposes, and challenge us to show up for our students in a different way than was assumed by the young horizontalists of the U.S. New Left movement, of which Illich and Freire were heavily influenced and influential. This is not a critique of their work, but a sympathetic extension or expansion pack which dignifies their core concerns while showing how neoliberalization has co-opted some of their conclusions in a way that misleads us, resulting in a failure to show up for our students. Levinas will show that the Socratic notion of maieutic teaching is a poor operating assumption which fails to account for or ethically respond to the responsibility we have to our students.
Boom. Yeah, and so then I said I hope to inspire some theoretical sophistication in how we think about and approach the whole student, as well as the idea of taking on the oppressive banking model of education. To explain it in the simplest terms, even when we try to be holistic and humane, the tendency nonetheless falls into the trap of what Levinas calls totalization, which means that we think we understand when we do not, and allow our political pigeonholing or reductive instrumentalization to take precedence in the classroom. My shortest version was brainwashing is cringe, not like Levinas, who is based and infinity pilled. And then I said, like, if a student gives us the sense that she is pro-life, that doesn't mean she's a right-winger. And even if she is, that doesn't mean she's wrong. We don't know and can't know what's going on in this intellectual journey. Like, this singular student has their own intellectual journey. And at a certain point, that is not our business. Our job is to make the space safe for disagreement and exploration. Our job is to provide them the tools and outside perspectives and knowledge they don't have access to otherwise, which is what it means to say teaching is not maieutic or whatever. I'm responding to the fact that in those teaching technique seminars or workshops that I was involved in, it was very common for some poor bleeding heart progressive to say, like, they had a person who thinks that the institution of policing is not inherently racist, and what should they do about that? Right? Like this instead of being like, yeah, people disagree, I'm here to give them the resources so they can come to their own decisions and become mature adults who are capable of being at a place in an intellectual journey and potentially growing into other positions. And hey, but guess what? I'm also at a certain point and I also might grow. Instead of doing that, they're like trying to preempt and render impossible the surfacing of the actual kinds of positions that are present in the classroom. And the reason that they care so much about it in the first place is because lectures have been replaced by discussions in the first place. Because honestly, I don't give a shit what a 20-year-old thinks. And it's kind of infantilizing for me to pretend that I care what that 20-year-old thinks. Now, if that's a singular 20-year-old like Sue, I think Sue is 20. Sue is, well, I've had time to get to know Sue. But I'm sorry, you don't spend the first 2 months just listening to people talk to give them a chance to make themselves known so that you can go, that's not your standard 20-year-old. That motherfucker, I like that person. You know why? Here's reasons. Instead, it's like, no, you're just supposed to act like they're all awesome and all you want to hear is their opinions. And it's just like, no, I'm not convinced that that person is my master yet. Right? Now, that lends itself to a sort of problem when it comes to what we're going to get into here with teaching and the dimension of height and the superiority of the other to me. The problem goes like this. I'm not so sure that Levinas ever addresses the issue of, like, well, am I not totalizing somebody if I think that they're not my master? Not everybody can be my master. I kind of have to choose my masters, right? He might say that the master chooses you. You find yourself compelled. You find yourself realizing you care about the judgment of this person, that you want what they have, or you want to impress them, or that you, whatever. There's some kind of egoic libidinal cathexis going on, perhaps. You know, something has been established. And in that sense, maybe the master chooses you. Or something about you, or something between you and the master, that's what chooses it. You could be a student in the university system taking 18 credits, and you're going to be surrounded by professors, a lot of whom are just clocking on to their job and reading off of notes that were given to them by Norton textbooks, and then they're going to have you go do exams that they did not even put together. Is that really your master, though? Does that one really come to you on high? Is that otherness proper to the Most High? So I'm calling into question the magisterial, the purported or de facto magisterial position of the instructor or professor, at the same time that I'm calling into question the purported magisterial position of the student supposed to know and teach us. And I'm saying, no, insofar as there are people who they're not here just to get credit, or they're not clocking on just to punch hours and or satisfy the terms of their salaried agreement or what have you. Insofar as there's real teaching going on and real learning going on, the priority of those relationships surpasses the priority of those people who are just like, no, I'm just killing time so that I can get back to partying with my friends, or yeah, no, I'm just punching hours so I can get back to something that I love that has nothing to do with what I teach, right? So I'm establishing that there is some kind of a division between authentic learning environments, authentic learning and teaching relationships, and what the opposite, like this bullshit that sucks away your soul if you care about the subject matter and you're having to spend so much time responding to the other who's not really responsibly showing up. They haven't proven that they're responsibly showing up to that relationship, to that learning relationship. Is this a problem for Levinas? I'm not so sure. And I'm not going to say for sure. I might write a paper about it someday. I'm interested in everybody else's thoughts as you read through this text. Levinas's work here gets radically called into question by Jacques Derrida in an essay called Violence and Metaphysics. And one of the things that Derrida achieves in his critique of totality and infinity is essentially to say, hey, you've got like this abstract sort of concept, the other, and then you've got like the person, the concrete other. Well, there's a problem. There's also just a plurality of actual others competing for your attention, competing for your time, competing for your energy, competing for a response, and you actually have to make decisions. And that would seemingly be the most complicated ethical conundrum that one could end up in, and it's not seemingly something that that Levinas takes on, and that's what Derrida is pointing out. And I think I've touched on this already in this series, and I said, that's why Levinas spends the next 10 years doing Otherwise in Being. It's a work that aims to overcome that and other problems. And that's great. But for right now, I'm going to do that thing where in my effort to play the believing game with Levinas and to assume that he's my master and that I don't have something to teach him, he has something to teach me. Part of what I'm going to do here is say, well, he's not an idiot, Derrida. He's not a dumbass. So then what's he getting at? We have to assume that he's coming from a place where, of course, he gets that, but he wants us to focus on seeing things a certain way. And I think that last week I touched on the sun as a radical example of sameness becoming other. Like the son to a father is more similar to the father than a daughter. Presumably, like obviously you could have 10 kids and all the girls turn out to be way more like you than the boys. But in terms of totalities and generalizations are always some form of totality. You're going to assume that boy, if you're a father, that son is going to be the most like you, which is why it's the most intuitive example of direct, like closest to same that you can get becoming so other, right? So yeah, the daughter is going to be radically other as well, but maybe that's a little less surprising because you've got some sort of gendered assumptions. I think Levinas is thinking that way. We have to surmise hypotheses to sort of justify why a thinker is doing what they're doing. And sometimes they actually told you and you missed it. And now you're sitting here surmising extra stuff that's, extraneous to the text and that actually distorts your understanding of it. But for now, I think it's justified and we're going with that. The son is the closest to the same that becomes radically other, whereas the widow, the orphan, the stranger, and I think we should obviously add refugee, that person is kind of the opposite of the son in the sense of like furthest removed. Like that's somebody else's problem. That's somebody else's business. That's somebody else. Like this son, obviously I'm responsible for the son, and this son is like a direct extension of me. Oh my God, he's so different from me. I didn't expect that. Well, you did expect the orphan, the widow, the stranger to be different. And in fact, that's what he's getting at. So I take the son and the widow to be metonyms for these kind of different sides of this lowercase the other concept, right? So that's part of this approach that I'm trying to take, is to say we have to do a little heavy lifting every once in a while. Well, if we do that heavy lifting on Derrida's behalf, if we say, hey, Derrida, he's not an idiot. So Derrida, come on, tell me, what do you think that he, if he's not an idiot, would say to this? Like, that's one of the things you'll never get from the French. They'll always tell you what somebody else thinks and then critique it, but they'll never go, here's why they think that, probably, like, here are 3 reasons why what they said would make sense. Now, they didn't say any of that, and what happened here is easily lent to this other understanding, and I'm going to go ahead and say how that situation could be fixed, or alternative responses to it. Now, of course, Derrida doesn't think Levinas is an idiot. He does think that Levinas is his master. He does think that Levinas is fundamentally his teacher, and ultimately he says that he is Levinasian. He says, look, I have profound differences in theology. I have profound differences in a lot of different things, but none of them matter because I am at the end of the day in total agreement with Levinas. Right? Well, what is he getting at? He's saying that the spirit of Levinas's project is one that he vibes with so strongly, like everything else is kind of accidental. It's like, yeah, we might disagree on that, but it doesn't really matter. Okay. Well, if I'm going to tell you how Levinas is going to solve that issue of the priority of this other as opposed to that other, I think that it's going to come down to this feeling of shame, this feeling of failure, this feeling of unworthiness. Who makes you feel that way the most? What in the actual world causes that moment of shame? Going over notes with Nance, I was talking about the rapist versus the porn addict as 2 examples of someone who is self-obsessed, self-engrossed, slave to drive. And in the case of the rapist, we were imagining that person is running through life like this fuckboy who's just cocaine and alcohol and Tinder swiping and bar hopping and constantly distracted. And then in a situation where he's only concerned with getting caught, he is not concerned with anything else. And he's like, oh, I'm not going to get caught. I'll go for it. And then he goes ahead and he commits the act. And then he's not even guilty. He doesn't even feel shame. Keeps on running through his life. And I was talking about how in that hypothetical situation where this person is functionally like a narcissistic sociopath, right? Like that, something like that. They don't have any remorse. They don't have any conscience. They could come to terms with what they've done and become ashamed. Shame could develop, right? A jail is a good example of people who are full of shame. Of course, you get people in there who are cocky and they've got no apologies, but you also got a lot of guys who are like remorseful, and they're constantly going to all the Bible studies offered by all the different chaplains, and they're like trying their best to make themselves someone new because they've got children on the outside and they feel so guilty about the relationship that was not built, and they feel so bad about the things that they did and the fact that their kids have to like live under the knowledge that this is something that they did. And, like that kind of sadness, that kind of remorse, it's very common, not just within those sort of Bible study circles. It's also very common in AA. It's also very common in self-help circles, right? Or Celebrate Recovery or Narcotics Anonymous. It doesn't have to be AA. AA was just a metonym for the entire world of recovery, where you have people sitting in circles talking about their problems, like in Fight Club, right? There's a lot of different kinds of circles like this. Well, if the driving or animating shame in your life was rape, or in the this other example, like the neglect of your own children. And if it made it so hard for you to live with yourself that you were that was the reason for your wanting to escape yourself. Living with yourself has become impossible because that self that you're trying to live with has done things that you can't live with, and so you have to escape. Stifled, suffocated. You're dwelling your home. The walls are closing in on you, so you got to go to the pub, you got to drink with the boys, you got to laugh about football, whatever. Right? I got to get out of here. I got to get out of here. I'm going to go do some cocaine. Right? I think that's a universal experience, but it's especially pronounced for men. I'm masculizing it as Levinas is, because I'm going to speak from my standpoint. At the point that Anne is ready to write her book on natality, and she'll have read Totality and Infinity for the third time, and she'll have read my book about, the problem with boys and men and masculinity and pornography and rape and all of that kind of stuff. She'll be able to come along and be like, here's what you're missing, Dave. This is something. And I've got, obviously I've got some insight from our conversations and from all of the books that I have read on these topics. But for the most part, I'm going to kind of just assume this very masculine version, which is one that can always be understood as Jekyll and Hyde. Right? Is Hyde the monster? Right? Is Hyde the monster and Jekyll is the person? Yeah. I mean, it sounds like it should be the other way around. It's kind of like Frankenstein's monster. It's like you want to call the monster Frankenstein, but in reality, that's his monster. So Jekyll and Hyde, I think people will say, like, they'll talk about Jekyll and what they mean is Hyde. And I get confused all the time. But basically, it's like, you got a perfectly decent human being most of the time, but every once in a while that person becomes a monster, right? And there's all kinds of myths like this. And there's certain books and movies and shows that I really love on the topic. And I'll tell you all about one of them soon, but also I want you to forget that I even brought that up. For now, I will bring it back around and you'll be like, oh shit. But for now, I'm using this example that came up when we were going over the notes on either like the last half of Thursday night or the first half of Friday afternoon, right? I kept coming back to this idea of shame, because for Levinas, it is shame that is this rupture of the totality, of the interiority, of the dwelling, of the self-sufficiency of the same, of your radical independence and freedom, right? Your freedom is what's called into question by the other. You feel so free. You don't have to know anything about history. You don't have to know anything about philosophy. You don't have to know anything about politics. You're free. You're radically separated. You're immersed in the world. You're participating in the world. Something that Terrence touched on yesterday in the second half of our Friday session. You're participating. You're immersed. You haven't had this radical sort of like calling into question yet. And then something you do hurts the other and you feel ashamed. Whether that took 30 seconds to process and you went from laughing to realizing you're a bully and you're like, oh, now, God damn it, now I feel bad. Versus, no, it took years and years and years to realize, oh, I was the bad guy in that situation, right? Whether it happens instantaneously or much later, it is this moment that Levinas wants to focus on. And people talk about the face-to-face and the vulnerability of the other and the thou shalt not kill and your responsibility to that other. And that's largely Judith Butler's influence. That's kind of where she takes it. But it's, for me, important to focus on this moment of absolute satisfaction and self-sufficiency, self-engrossment, and being with oneself that is then called into question by the other. And the result of that experience is shame. And I talked about how 70% of men in the United States have either they're addicted to porn, maybe they wouldn't characterize it, they're just regular users of pornography, and that most of that porn is not wholesome, to say the least. A lot of it's degrading, and it's not just like cartoons. A lot of it's like degrading real people have to go through these degrading acts, and you can rationalize it any way you like, and I even would say maybe it's justified. Maybe certain types of people. I'm doing the philosophical hypothetical here, so don't hold me to this. But I'm just saying, like, maybe certain types of people are just whores. They are ontologically whores, and that's something that we should actually say. Not only is it work, but it's actually something that we should like sort of bow down to and treat like how we do doctors and other very impressive professionals. Like, I'm open to that possibility that there might be people whose real calling, is to just be malleable to the male gaze and do whatever, to satisfy its market demands. I'm open to that argument being made. But I want to set aside rationalizations. And by the way, what I just posited is an extreme form of rationalization that most people wouldn't even articulate. Most people would have some other milquetoast version of that. I'm just going to the extreme and saying I'm fine with it, and then saying no. But even with that acknowledged, people like Louise Perry in the case against the sexual revolution, this kind of feminist who's against the industry altogether, are actually in agreement with the overwhelming majority of men. They're in agreement with them. This is something Louise Perry doesn't even touch on in that book, the fact that most men agree with her. But the fact is, she talks about this, she says one of the most universal experiences of the men who do consume porn is that they feel ashamed the moment they're done. And they push the laptop away. They push it away in disgust. Now, I think that it takes someone like her, in all of her flaws, taking this sort of courageous stand and saying the thing, for us to go like, damn, wait, is that really like a majoritarian experience? And it's an experience that people revisit multiple times per day or week or month? Well, I think that should then be something that we take seriously, right? There's a lot of, like, for instance, think about the mirror stage. It's not, the baby, like, finally being able to recognize itself in the mirror and then go, that's me. It's not a momentary thing, and it doesn't even require a mirror. This is just like a metronym of a dynamic that Lacan is getting at. Well, in the same way, wouldn't this constantly repeated thing that involves this profound experience of shame be something worth philosophizing, right? I would think so, if we want to understand the world that we live in today, especially considering the fact that we are in cyber history, and cyber means web. And I think one of the most visited places on the web, it's like in the top 5, is Pornhub. So I think this is all, a big part of critical media theory. It's a big part of ethics. And it's something that I wanted to make sure to introduce within the context of these lectures for people who are not going to go into all of the sort of supplemental deep dives into the notes that we're doing on Thursdays. And this week we also did it on Friday, but normally that will all happen on Thursday, the going over of the notes in this sort of linear way. Well, Judith Butler didn't go through male puberty, and so she'll never understand that experience. She might have something in her own experience that rhymes with that experience, but probably like the most profound experience that explains so much crazy behavior you see in the United States is something that is outside of her grasp, and she can only get it from a man. And that man in this sort of example would be her master, right? In the Levinasian sense, the master is the one who has something you don't. Well, there are women who are my master when it comes to fertility and to periods and to being embodied and having to deal with all that shit. Like, there are people who are my master when it comes to that kind of a thing. And it's not something that I want to think about, and it's something that I can easily avoid thinking about. I just don't engage with people who like to talk about such things. But, you know, in my desire to understand the human condition and what I don't have access to in this body, I have been interested in finding out. And it's a formative thing. Every month you have this experience of powerlessness, in the sense that you can't, like, there's no ignoring it. Your body will remind you that you are a part of nature and its cycles, and that nature and its cycles has dubbed you the one whose entire life task is reproduction. Like, from the standpoint of nature, nature's bitch slapping you and saying, you didn't have a kid this month, huh? You didn't conceive? Well, you're going to have a lot of cramps and you're going to have to change out the fucking, you know, and so the whole period is basically just nature being like, fuck you. You're going to have to do something, like maybe go get laid, you know? But on the other side, the male experience is like, fuck. I have to do something with this. I have a gift to share. Nobody wants it. I'll go share it with Pornhub. And then you feel ashamed afterwards, okay? So I don't know what woman shame means. You know, if we're going with this very simplistic example, I understand there's a lot of nuance and other alternatives. I'm going with a heuristic here, so don't persecute me for being a biological sexed reductivist. I'm not. I understand that there's a lot of gray areas, like that. What's her name? Khalid, whatever, the lady who just won that boxing tournament. And, you know, it's like there's a lot of nuance here, right? Like, not all bodies are created equal or the same. And you could be a woman who's like 6'5" and packs a real punch. Like, obviously. But what is the kind of shame that might be one of the most commonly experienced forms of shame for girls on their journey into womanhood? I don't know. But going with Levinas, when he talks about shame, I think one of the most universal experiences for men, and this is, like I said, a very masculine book, is going to be some kind of sex-related shame. And when he's talking about the arbitrariness of your freedom being called into question because that freedom was used to, at some point, whether knowingly or not, hurt another person, like, I'm going to go ahead and say, well, since this is a masculinist approach anyway, let's go ahead and talk about what that means, okay? So that's why I do all of this, and that's why I'll keep coming back to it. And if that makes you uncomfortable, I'm sorry. Maybe I should have said trigger warning ahead of time, but, you know, I think it's probably okay. And the fact is if you sit in academic classrooms today, you have to put a content warning on almost anything except for, you know, talking about your BDSM sex preferences, right? Like, you're able to talk about that, but you can't talk about, like, the fact that rape is inherent to war, that war doesn't happen without rape, that those two things are hand in hand, that, like, a universal experience of war is that it means killing men and raping women, right? Well, you're not supposed to talk about that. People get really offended about that. It's a very uncomfortable fact. Yeah, well, it should be uncomfortable because there's nothing more rape culture-ish or rape culture-y. There's nothing more true about rape culture than the fact that when it is most out in the open, it is in war, right? So being anti rape culture in a sort of sense means you have to be anti-war. But a lot of people don't think about that. They don't read the Rape of Non-King, and they don't realize that most troops throughout history, it was just kind of like, hey, yeah, you get to do this. You get to rape and pillage. It's just like one of the few, you know, things that is going to be worth it in the moment. Sure, you might spend the rest of your life not recognizing yourself and not being able to live with yourself and hating yourself. And that is why Levinas in the preface said that war turns. It's the injustice of war is not what it does to the victims. Primarily what he wanted to focus on is what it does to the victors, what it does to the instruments of the war machine, what it does to the people carrying out its commands. Well, that kind of shame, which would then be properly unique to veterans, and I'm not saying all veterans, of course. I think the United States military tries really hard to have some kind of code of conduct, at least on the books and generally enforced. Like they're trying to sterilize war, right? Put a rainbow on it, put some women into it, maybe even let trans people into the war, right? Like that's okay, sure. They're trying to sterilize it, but ultimately it's brutal, it's inhumane, and it turns not just the victims into objects that will have to live with a trauma for the rest of their lives. It turns the people carrying out those actions into beings who go, when they get back home, how the hell am I supposed to live with myself? And then what you get is people saying, well, listen up here, Mr. Veteran. There's a great way to live with yourself. You don't have to drink alcohol, just become a businessman. And so, you could become a businessman, you can become a evangelical fundamentalist, you can become a homeless alcoholic, you could maybe be some version of all three of those things at the same time. Whatever, it doesn't matter. Your options are limited and they're shit. Your options are limited and they're shit, and they say, oh, well, you're depressed? Take these antidepressants. Go to the VA. They'll help you. They won't, but they will, right? Like that's what you're being told. That is what I want to highlight. These kinds of experiences are what I want to highlight by making this idea of being called into question by the other concrete. He doesn't give a lot of examples. I have so far used the example of the bully who's laughing and then realizes, oh no, I hurt somebody. I have used the example of the porn addict. I have used the example of the rapist, and I've used the example of the soldier turned vet. Well, all of those examples, like I said, they're primarily masculine, though of course, like women can participate in these things, and I've definitely met some women who are bullies, and some of them are hyper masculine, and that's something they have to deal with. But the issue here is, how do you respond in that moment when you've realized you hurt somebody? Let's use the bully as the example. That bully was playing. I was that kid always, like with my siblings. I was always just playing around, and I had a lot of younger siblings, and I'd play around. And then at some point somebody gets hurt, and then you feel bad, but it's like they were loving it up until the second when they weren't loving it, right? And then you go, oh, God damn it, I hurt somebody. And then of course they're like, oh, Dave's mean, Dave's an asshole, Dave's a bully, right? I was in a really big family with a lot of siblings, and so I had a couple of sisters like directly under me in age, and so boy mean was like one of the first things that one of my sisters learned to say. Boy mean, boy mean, and it's like I remember just being humiliated, right? But also part of what I was experiencing was like a sort of sense of shame, right? What do you do in that moment? Well, you get defensive. It's usually the thing that you do. You get defensive. Now, a good parent, and my parents are really good parents, but a good parent who has time and energy and their wits about them isn't just going to say, okay, Dave gets a spanking now. Like, oh, you bullied this person. Now I'm going to bully you back. There we go. Justice has been served. But instead, they're probably going to sit down with you and like talk about like, have you ever do you remember what it was like when those boys at church were like beating you up? How did you feel afterwards? Okay, so that's how she feels right now. Something like that. Like, how do you feel about that? Oh, you feel bad. Well, what's a way that we could like make things better? What do you think's a way that we could make things better? And in the future, when you play with them, what are some ways that maybe things won't go that far again? Right? That's a way that the third party, the master, the other in that situation is able to intervene. Obviously, the tendency for overworked, time energy lacking, structurally stultified, and functionally illiterate parents is to just say, oh my God, spank the kid, and then say, no, apologize. No, apologize. And so, of course, your dignity has been completely erased. You've been essentialized as something bad, and it's a shitty situation, right? Well, in the schoolyard, I have to assume that if you're bullying, but you didn't realize you're bullying, and then all of a sudden you realize you hurt somebody, and then everybody starts thinking of you as a bully, like you're going to want to defend yourself, or you're going to want to just take it and own it. Yeah, okay, fuck it, that's me. Because, you know, all of a sudden you feel persecuted because people are bullying you because they didn't understand that you were just playing around in the best way that you knew how, because you never grew up with parents who took the time to talk to you about these kinds of things in the way that I just outlined. These are all just ideal models. These are all just heuristics. These are all just examples. These are all just ways of getting at something. And it's part of it is just to say, like, this is what Levinas is getting at repeatedly over and over and over again for the first 33 through 105 pages, okay? Is to say that freedom, that unbounded joy of your freedom in the playground inevitably results in somebody getting hurt. He's not saying don't play. He's not saying don't be free. He's just saying that freedom is the thing that makes you become aware that there's something before your freedom. And it's called justice. And it's breaking with justice that makes you feel accountable in the first place. And it's the feeling of needing to be accountable to the other that makes you start rationalizing and justifying your freedom and responding to the other and doing apologetics or apology to the other. Not apology as in, oh, I'm so sorry, but apology as in, well, this is why I was doing that, right? Apology in the Greek sense. Well, if that's the origin of rationalizing, and if that's the origin of reasoning, and if reason and rationality are originating from freedom, realizing it's run amok and that there was something called justice that has been trespassed, some kind of ethical relation that has been trespassed, and you feel some kind of a need to defend yourself, if that is the origin of reason, then that means that philosophy and science have their roots in the ethical relationship itself, and that prior to apology and prior to reason and prior to rationality is the face-to-face relationship of being called into account by the other, having yourself and your freedom and its arbitrariness and its eventual cruelty become visible. And so Levinas wants you to think about that. And I want to add something to it that is, I think, Levinasian in spirit. And it's that question of what do you do in that situation? Do you defend yourself? Do you distract yourself? Or do you just sit with it and say, you know what? Yeah, I went too far. I fucked up. Do you instantly start trying to convince people, don't worry, it'll never happen again. Here's all my reasons for why it won't happen again. No, that's just more justifying your freedom, man. Like, take a chill pill, take the L and sit with it for a minute, because if you just run from that experience and you're not going to learn anything, right? You're not going to learn anything. Nothing's going to change because it only became visible to you when you were called into question. But the fact that it was happening means that something like it had already been happening, probably. It probably wasn't the first time that it happened, right? Stuff led up to that. There's something about your habitus. There's something about your repetition compulsion that got you there. And if you just run from the situation, if you just focus on escape, if you just focus on distraction, if you just go, you'll find yourself right back there soon. And then you'll feel real bad about it. And every time you feel bad, you'll be even more like, no, I have to get away from this, right? Or you'll just double down on the reasoning from before, right? So in that situation of being that parent who is dealing with that kid, and I'm going to just go ahead and use myself as an example, like, what would I do? What would I want my parents to do with me now that I'm old enough to think about what I would do with my own children? And it's like, yeah, no, you're going to want to sit with them. You're not going to try to shame them. They already feel ashamed. At the point that they're sitting with you, they already feel ashamed. There's no point trying to rub it in. That's just a power move. They already regret it. They already don't want to do it again. The question is what can they learn from you in that moment? And part of like what to learn in that moment is like sitting with it, coming to terms with it, being like, yeah, that's part of me, but it's not all of me. And part of me is higher than that and is able to choose a different path. And it's going to be hard and you might slip and you might repeat, but there is a different path. What does it look like? What's a real way forward next time you're in that situation? Right? I don't know. Does anybody else feel like they wish more parents were like that? One head nodded. Cesar, you wish more parents were like that? Nance, what do you think? I don't know.
Yeah, man, like we're all caught up in our material conditions, and there's always a reason for why we can't do the right thing. Like and most of the time they're legitimate reasons. Like there are pressing matters you have to see to, economic necessity, or even when you get caught up in the other types of games that we play, those become a type of necessity. So there's almost always a legitimate reason for us to just be shitty people. But it's also almost always possible to like break out of that and just take the little bit of time necessary to do the self-reflection, and kind of impart that to your children. Like it's almost always possible to take a few minutes to be like, why did that happen? Just like thinking about, where does electricity come from? Does it come from the plug, or does it come from the power plant? Where did my banana come from? Did it come from Whole Foods, or did it come from the people picking it? Like there's almost always time to do that, but it's easy to get carried away in all the responsibilities. So yes, I wish everyone was like that. And I empathize with people who aren't, because I've been on both sides of the question. And I'll continue to be a shitty person, and I will also continue to try to be a good person. Like we're all both. We're all always both. But yeah, dude, like it's not hard. It is. It's hard to take that step and like enter that space, but also it's not hard. Like it just takes a couple minutes to do some self-reflection. Like I wish we had a system that was designed to get people moving in that direction rather than keeping them fascinated with the world of shiny objects.
Yeah.
Dave,
And of course,
you,
sorry. What's that, Cesar?
I was just gonna say, could you repeat what your original question was about wanting more parents to be in what sense? In what way?
Oh, instead of, just saying, oh, look, you hurt somebody, I'm going to spank you and then make you say sorry. Instead being like, sitting with that person, sharing that space, like they already feel ashamed, like especially early on. And I'm not saying like no punishments. I'm not saying no whatever. But what I'm getting at is like that sort of like you as a parent have like a wealth of experience, right? Ways of navigating certain situations, right? Share it. And it's not just, hey, next time in that situation, here's how. But instead like being like, being with the child and not demonizing them, saying, well, you hurt somebody. Can you think of a time where you might have felt similar to how she feels right now? Right? And getting them to empathize, getting them to come up with some example of how they felt in the past, and then being like, how could that person make it okay to you now? What are some ways forward where you could make it okay? Right? Like that kind of approach is what I was saying. And then I was like, I just threw it out there. I was like, do more of you wish that, or do you all wish that there was more of that approach, right, in parenting today? And I didn't know if you were going to respond. Go for it.
Well, wasn't sure. I have two thoughts with that. One of them is, I'm not a parent, so I don't know what it looks like to be on that side of the relationship. But all of us have biological parents, right, in order to have come into this world. So whether or not we like it, we do have those people who brought us into the world, and people could have vastly different experiences of what their parents meant to them in their life. It could be the greatest thing. It could have been the worst thing that ever happened to them, in a sense. And so whether that's true or not, whether they're the best or the worst things that happened, I think there's a point where the child does have to come to some realization of what the parent actually is. And that requires going through a certain amount of years with the relationship with the parent, where at first, I think most children have the sense that the parent is acting as something like, basically like God or like a demigod, right? And then at some point, I think the child has to learn that maybe they're less than a demigod, that they have to see their actual otherness. If we're going to maybe try to use the Levinas terms, there has to be some kind of like, oh, there is going to be some kind of separation between me as the child and these people that are my parents. And knowing that they have their own challenges and existence to also have to deal with themselves, and coming to that realization can be very difficult, but ultimately I think what is necessary for them people to kind of actually experience that otherness of their parents. And I'll just leave it there for now.
Right. Thank you. And so for right now, that was lovely. And thanks to Nance and Cesar for that. And I also want, everyone's reflections on it over time, especially in the forum, but also in our discussions, because I want to hear everybody's thoughts a bit more. But right now I feel a little pressed for time, so I'm going to try to close this all out. So now that don't let me saying that make you think it'll be over in 20 minutes, but I haven't read the quotes I want to kind of get to. And so the segue here is to say that the question about the good life, what is the good life, comes to different people from different experiences. And yeah, some people had miserable upbringings or their lives went to shit at some point and they blame their parents for all of that. I was definitely like a blaming my parents sort of guy for a long time. And it's a commonly known fact that time energy theory was something that when it was just a baby, long before it was a concept, there's like this dawning realization for me that there are structural conditions of possibility, horizons of possibility that are at the disposal for parents in this society. And that those are structured by political and economic relations. Also, there are cultural conditions for our misery. They're not just downstream from the base, from its relations or, the field of its actual material arrangements. No, the structural stultification of time energy results in a lot of things. I say functional illiteracy a lot, which is to say, yeah, you can read enough to be a victim of the Dunning-Kruger effect, but you don't actually get outside of your bubble. You don't take on other perspectives. You don't understand anything about interpretation and the responsibility that every human being has to interpret. No, you instead just are a literalist. You take everything at face value. Functional illiteracy as a product of the stultification of time energy that is structural, but it's also not just structural in the sense of, well, capital takes, the production of capital requires the reduction of all your time energy into nothing more than labor power, which means that you don't have the large energy infused repeatable blocks of reliable time between us in order to be able to do the kinds of things that you would have to be able to do to not be functionally illiterate, right? Well, it's also the schooling system itself that presupposes that whole system of production and tries to reproduce its relations, its class relations. And that schooling system does assume a lot of things and perpetuate a lot of things. And it's something that we get into in the Idea of the University course and the Professional Managerial Class Consciousness and Ideology course and the Critical Media Theory course and the Critical Doxology and Time Energy course, or I guess those last two are seminars. But all of that stemming from this question of what is the good life, and that question stemming from a fundamental experience of oh shit, this sucks, there's something wrong going on, right? Well, a lot of that is broken homes and dysfunction. And dysfunctional homes, you know, I think of, when I think of a dysfunctional home, like the image that comes to my mind is something that's held together by some formative experiences, either in my own household or in households in the neighborhood, the wood, where I grew up. You know, like trailer trash shit. Well, it involves a lot of screaming over barking dogs and dishes clanging around and filth piling up and crying and kids running away and getting pregnant early and parents in alcoholism, and you know that's not the sort of middle class dysfunctional home. You know, the sort of archetypical dysfunctional middle class home is going to look very different, and I would say it's going to look very different depending on if that home is primarily a PMC or petty bourgeoisie version of middle class, and that you can have both of those tendencies represented under one roof. And so just all kinds of complexity can be added here. My idea of dysfunction, which comes down to everything bad in the world, and like I said, lots of screaming, is less seen in middle class neighborhoods where CPS would get called, where neighbors would intervene, where parents know like they can't just run around screaming, where kids just know they can't run around crying. Like there's like the dogs aren't barking all day. There's something different going on there, and it's usually a lot quieter. It's usually more measured, or the outbursts are a little bit more calculated. There's a lot of different things that go into it. But my fundamental thesis has been, as long as I've been public, that all of that is driven by the structural stultification of time energy. So the question of the good life comes from the realization that a lot of people are coming from broken homes and that there's a lot of dysfunction. And a lot of people have a lot of reasons for what constitutes the conditions of possibility for all of that broken home dysfunction, but they leave out time energy lack. They leave out time energy lack, and that's a huge problem. They would much rather blame, oh, that parent is a narcissist, and that parent is a sociopath, and that parent is just toxic, and that parent is... So they psychologize and naturalize something that is happening within the context of well, everyone being told that they are ultimately responsible, but at the same time being reduced to nothing more than consuming producers and producing consumers, right? So Levinas is not ignorant of the fact that the state is a thing and that it has its own agenda. And he's not ignorant of the fact that capital is a thing and that it has its own agenda. And, you know, if you pay attention, you'll see him talk about it from time to time, though it's not his major emphasis, because his major emphasis is on what the state and the and capital lose sight of and or necessarily try to foreclose, which is our primary responsibility to others before the almighty dollar or the vote or representation within the political system, however it takes form. being a subject, being a citizen, being a consumer, being a producer. All of those things are important in secondary. They're important but secondary to this face-to-face relationship. And it's that face-to-face relationship that gets not just like sidelined, but actually like erased, even though, as he's going to be repeatedly saying in different ways, it is the origin of our need to justify ourselves. And as the need to justify ourselves, as that comes from this face-to-face relationship, we can then deduce logically that reasoning and therefore also philosophy and science are themselves downstream from that face-to-face relationship. That's the most important thing going on here. Now, I want to turn you guys' eyes to this whiteboard. There's part of it that you can't see. It's okay if you can't see it because the microphone's blocking part of it. There's a lot of words on here. And last week, for the first part, at the end, I listed off a bunch of terms that are synonymous with infinity and a bunch of terms that are synonymous with totality. I have the infinity symbol right here, the totality symbol right here. This is the real infinity symbol. This totality symbol I made up because I just needed a symbol for it. And it's just a circle around a T. The T will make it really easy to remember for everybody, I hope. And the circle shows that it's a totality. It's closed in on itself. There's an inside and an outside, and they're well defined, as is true with every circle. Okay. Well, those terms on the left-hand side underneath infinity, I say synonymous, but that does not mean equal in the sense of there is a one-to-one identification where they can be collapsed into one another. That's not what we're saying. But there's a rhyme and a reason to why these are all on the one side and the other ones are all on the other side. And these all come down to different articulations and levels of analysis that Levinas is attempting to operationalize in an attempt to get his way of seeing things through to us. Okay? And so under infinity, we have desire, exteriority, transcendence, face, expression, metaphysics, other as in concrete other, or as in the other person, or as in uppercase O other. Then we have the other, lowercase in this case, the other, meaning like, it's more like the concept, the structure, the category of like the abstract other. And then justice. And also thinking of it as a Platonic form, like this lowercase, the other, as like a sort of Platonic form. There is, that's not right, but it's a good, it's worth bringing up. That's why I brought it up here, right? I think it was maybe Christopher who said that's one way of maybe, and he was saying it's maybe, but it's not that it is that. He was careful about how he presented that idea. It's like that. And we want to keep that in mind, which is to say, the concept of the tree, the concept of the cat, the concept of the hot dog, right? Well, we can start having a conversation about whether that hot dog really is a sandwich or not. And we can start talking about whether that tree that looks like a plant really is still a tree, or, oh my God, it's actually a giant plant that looks like a tree. It's a bush, but it looks like a tree because it has a really thick, whatever. We could get into those questions, those sort of like boundary questions, and try to stipulate our concepts, and then maybe we can try to characterize them and then redefine them and in an attempt to turn them into rigid designators in Saul Kripke's sense. We can do that. Levinas is a little bit more poetic, obviously, so he's not going to do that. It's up to us if we want to do that, to do so. But the other is, like the hot dog, a concept. And therefore, there might be what we could say is like the ideal form of the hot dog, right? Like, I can get two slices of bread and put the hot dog between them and eat it, and people are going to say, it's a hot dog. But then also, like, there's an ideal form. And yeah, I can use a rock to hammer a steak, but using a hammer that works just the right way. Oh, now that's the ideal. Right? So that's how we should be thinking about the other, lowercase, and the other with an uppercase O is going to be the widow, the orphan, the stranger, the son, as well as everything in between that, from your daughter, your wife, your ex, your neighbor down the street versus your neighbor 3 blocks away versus those people at the student or the teacher parent conference versus the housing association. I don't know. I'm just listing off middle class examples, but then I'll go to, those people on your factory floor, to those people, whatever. We can come up with a lot of other ways of skinning this cat, to use that disgusting and hilarious expression. But the point is that every time he's using this uppercase O other, he is thinking and wants you to think of some definite other human being. And then every time he uses this lowercase other, he's thinking of just like the concept. And so I have spent a lot of time going over certain sections of the text, thanks to that conversation that we had on Friday night. And I think I'm in agreement more or less with Terrence and Zach. I think that there's like a happy middle ground between us all when it comes to this. I think we can all agree on as much as I've said so far. Zachary would have there be another kind of other that would be like the kind of other when you're differentiating yourself from others. So it's like, I'm not this pen. And so that's going to be like this more like, what is it? Would you almost say a dialectical or analytic kind of other? And then my question about the French is like, is that going to be a different word than the two that get translated as uppercase O other and lowercase like the other? Like, I don't know. I'm curious, but it doesn't matter for now. What matters for now is this whole list: infinity, desire, exteriority, transcendence, face, expression, metaphysics, uppercase O other, lowercase the other, justice, and saying all belong to this side. I've put it on the left side. And on the right-hand side, we have totality. And with totality, opposite of desire, we have need, just your base biological needs necessary for reproducing your singular existence, your body, etc. And down the line, need, interiority, separation, ipseity, plastic form, expressed, ontology, atheism, home, freedom, said, history. I say all of this is suffocating. Suffocation is part of the insufficiency, the absence of truth, which would say, ignorance, the being at home with oneself, the dwelling. Did I repeat atheism? Oh, I did. I can delete that. Superiority of the same, and or impersonal reason. We'll come back to that distinction. All of that belongs to this right side. I didn't do left versus right here for political reasons. It's kind of funny that it worked out that way. I think some people would very happily put the word left on this side and put the word right on that side. The right cares about totality. The left cares about infinity. They would do that. I'm not doing that. It's just a funny rhyming accident, okay? I could have written it totality and infinity, which is the name of the book. And I was going to write it that way, in that order. But it makes more sense to do it this way because I wanted to do infinity greater than totality, desire greater than need, exteriority greater than interiority, transcendence greater than separation, face greater than plastic form, expression greater than expressed, metaphysics greater than ontology, other greater than atheism, the other greater than home, justice greater than freedom, and saying greater than said. It's beautiful. Now, we can also say that every one of the terms on the right here presupposes the term on the left, right? The section that is called, on here for section A, part 4, I say metaphysics, and then an arrow sign, and then ontology. which is to say, if metaphysics, then ontology. In logic, when there's an arrow, that's what it means. But I also mean that in a looser form in my notes a lot of the time, where it's not an if-then proposition, but it's also just to say this thing precedes that thing, right? So anybody who's ever going over my notes, hopefully you don't ever have to do that. The arrow sign, it's always like, which one am I doing? Am I doing that there's I'm not, sometimes I do if this, then that. Other times I'm just saying there is this comes before that. And saying that something comes before that doesn't mean that it has to always come before that. That's part of why I want to highlight that there is a confusion there. But for our purposes right now, the point is that ontology presupposes metaphysics. That's the name of that section, but I wrote metaphysics, arrow sign, ontology. Well, that's just another way of saying that ontology presupposes metaphysics. Now, what he means by ontology is an obsession over the fact that things are, that beings exist, that there is this thing of existence, and we forget about existence because all science cares about is analyzing entities in the world, which we call beings. And then, of course, because it kind of loses the forest for the trees, it forgets that some of those trees are radically different, right? Going with that analogy or that metaphor of forest for trees, the forest that you're losing is being, because all you're focusing on is beings. But when you do that, you might actually start to conflate different kinds of being, and now your ontological soup is all fucked up. And so Heidegger says we need to write a whole book just setting up the questions so that we can even think what is being. We're going to step back and think, how do we even pose the question about being in the first place? And then Levinas is going to go, yeah, that was really great, and I got super into it, man. But the problem is that what you're doing there with ontology, you're presupposing something that is more real than being, and it's the actual concrete face-to-face relationship that is the origin. It's a truly primordial thing that you've been missing throughout all your work, and that is the fact that before we ever become fundamental ontologists, we're always first metaphysicians, right? Well, we're always possibly metaphysicians if we take on the call of responsibility to the other, if we take on the challenge to hold space, to welcome the other. And in the case of like doing that with Levinas or Heidegger, that would mean like giving them a chance to say what they think, and like not just trying to prove them wrong throughout the task, but actually tarrying with it, right? Insofar as they are your master, insofar as they challenge you, insofar as you care for some reason, if they're your master, then yes, there's something about the ethical relationship that is on us as what he'll call metaphysicians to approach that other, that master, in a kind of welcoming way, as opposed to this sort of like, how will I use you? How will I use you? And, you know, I talk about this on page 35, and I think it's worth turning to it. So if we turn to page 35, section, the breach of totality, right? He says, the metaphysician and the other cannot be totalized. The metaphysician is absolutely separated. The metaphysician is you or me insofar as we are trying to understand the other and get outside of ourself and get outside of our interiority, get outside of our separation, insofar as we are trying to transcend and to get to what made all of this possible before me. What are the historical, political, philosophical conditions of possibility for my being in the world? The precursors to my freedom. Insofar as you're trying to do that, you're doing metaphysics now. Most of the time, what we're doing is ontologizing when we think we're not ontologizing. Most of the time, we're running around saying, this is that, and that's that, and they're like this, and they're like that, and I'm this, and I'm like that. That's ontology for Levinas. And he's saying, yeah, but you have this possibility of being a metaphysician because that relationship, that face-to-face relationship, that being accountable to the other, the caring about the judgment of the other, the needing to justify yourself to that other, that is a possibility for you to hold, to try to practice, to try to cultivate. And insofar as you're doing that, you're not going to just try to analyze and categorize and classify the outer world. You're also going to allow yourself to be called into question. And in so doing, you're going to be practicing critique, what he calls critique, right? So on page 35, he's talking about how the one and the other, and it's the concept of the other, it's the lowercase, the other, are not exchangeable terms. They're not reversible terms. You can't just like put them on one side and then switch them around. Which is to say, insofar as you are the metaphysician trying to understand the other is outside of you. Insofar as you're trying to understand, that other is your master. They come from a dimension of height and nobility, he says. This dimension of height and nobility is to say that they are the ones responsible for answering your questions. They're responsible in the sense that they have a sort of authorial power to clarify where they're coming from, right? So you should be receptive and attentive to your teacher. This is kind of like literally what he's going to say. And he's going to say this repeatedly, not just in, part we were reading last week, but repeatedly. And so I want to turn to what page do I want to turn to? I want to turn to page 96, close to the end of this week's reading. You'll all be doing this, hopefully this week, page 96. And I recommend for somebody who's not got a lot of time or energy, but wants to do some of the reading, take something from some part of this lecture where I read something and just read that page. And if that's all you can do in a sitting, then that's fine, because there is no linear order to all of this. I'm convinced of that. There's a bunch of operating assumptions that go with a certain way of seeing, and he's going to beat those with a hammer repeatedly throughout the whole book in different ways. And so if you jump in here at page 96 and just read page 96, and then you decide, okay, I'm going to read the page before 96 and the page after 96, well, that's a better way to spend 45 minutes than trying to do everything in a chronological order whenever it comes to this text in particular. I do think that that's true, as long as you're doing it within the structure and order of an actual course where you've got that supplement of the lecture, right? Because, as Levinas is going to repeatedly say, there is the anarchy of facts versus teaching, which imposes a structure. Teaching imposes a structure. And so it's the teacher who comes along and says, hey, it's not just the anarchy, infinite expanse of TMI, too much information, too many facts that you could just randomly assemble any which way you like. No, the point of the master is to say, there's a way of prioritizing this information and these facts. And the reason I want to prioritize page 96 is because this is where Levinas is radically post-structuralist. And that is to say, he is challenging the tendencies of Saussurean linguistics. And I would also say he is challenging Heideggerian referential totalities, as I was going into last time. Because before the hammer or the word tree gets its sensibility within a referential context of tools or functions or relations, or before they get their sense from not being those other signifiers and being like these other signifiers, before all of that, Heidegger and Saussure, there's the other person. We go into language as a response to infinity, to the face, to being called into question. We go into language for communication because we, pure positivity, overloaded with ourselves, completely having all of our needs met, we're still unhappy. We do need the other. We go into the other through language. We go to the other through language, not into the other, but we go to the other through language. And therefore, that language is not a depersonified, self-moving, self-evolving, structural apparatus that just like does its own things and uses us like puppets. It's not. No, there's real people in language. As a little child, you did not enter language so that you could play with it. You started playing with it because you wanted to use it because it was your way of communicating with other people. And at some point, you probably wanted to give an account of yourself. Speak up for yourself. Say, okay, you all keep saying this, but this is actually how I see it. Or, oh, this is why I do things that way. Also, obviously, like you have needs that can only be met through language, and you have desires that can only be met through language. And so, yes, language precedes its instrumentalization. I don't know, actually, I think I complicated things by saying that needs can be satisfied through language. That might complicate things, because then you could say, those needs precede so those needs need to be responded to. Have you instrumentalizing language from the beginning when the little kid is saying, I want that, right? But you also want things you don't need. And part of that is actual attention. And there are certain people whose attention you want, whose approval you want, whose judgment you want to satisfy. And none of that has anything to do with your physical needs. None of that has anything to do with your physical needs. That has to do with metaphysical desire in Levinasian terms. Now, what does it mean to say that it's not just a giant structure of signs pointing at each other? It means, in the very middle of page 96, the sign does not signify the signifier as it signifies the signified. Clear as day, right? That's very profound. Now, some people's brains will have just melted. I'm going to read the rest of it. If your brain just melts the whole time, don't worry. I'll come up and I'll come right back and I'll clean it up by doing a little exegesis. But I'm just going to go ahead and read through. He says the sign does not signify the signifier as it signifies the signified. The signified is never a complete presence, always a sign in its turn. It does not come in a straightforward frankness. The signifier, he who emits the sign, faces, despite the interposition of the sign, without proposing himself as a theme. He can, to be sure, speak of himself, but then he would announce himself as signified and consequently as a sign in his turn. The other, uppercase O other, the signifier manifests himself in speech by speaking of the world and not of himself. He manifests himself by proposing the world, by thematizing it. This uppercase O other that we're talking about is in its capacity as teacher, in its capacity as having something that I don't have. And every teacher has a gift to give the world. If they feel teaching to be a calling, then their obsession over the subject matter is because they feel like there's a gift that they have been given, not just by the subject matter, but probably their own teachers. And it's a gift that they can only truly accept by proceeding to continue giving. And in a sort of sense, you can't even truly learn it until you kind of take on that role of continuing to share it. So that's why I brought in my response to this teaching, this lightning talk that I wanted to give. Like I read out the abstract for my lightning talk that I wanted to give, which didn't get accepted. They never even responded to it. But the reason why I wanted to try to talk about all of that, like I was talking to 5-year-olds and break it down for a bunch of people who aren't necessarily into theory, is because it's, I can use plain speak to say, hey, you have something that your students don't. The ones who are there for the right reasons, they actually want you to share it. They might want you to not do it like a robot. They might want you to do it from your heart. And they might want you to, indeed, center them to some degree. But that doesn't mean you just roll over and let the whole classroom just chatter and play games. It actually means that the people who are there for the right reasons, like there's something you have that they don't have. And some people who aren't there for the right reasons, they're just going to make mom and dad happy and they care about making friends and they don't care if it costs $100,000 just to make these friends that won't necessarily even last. No, they might not be there for the right reason, but they could get awakened by you. Like you have a radical responsibility to not assume that they just want to get the grade, to not assume that they're just drinking and coming in hungover and thinking about getting laid later. No, you have to think that is part of your audience, but you also have to think there's a person there who might not be inspired yet, but I can share something with them, and some of them maybe will get inspired, and then there'll be something. This metaphysical desire will be ignited in them. That's what I wanted to say to my colleagues in that presentation. Well, if you pay close attention between pages, I'll say especially like between like 93 and 99 or like 101, between like, so basically in the last 10 pages of section C, if you pay close attention, teaching is the theme. It says objectivity and language and truth and justice, and it has like these language and attention. These are all like headers, sure. But I want you to think about teaching and how the teacher has something you don't, otherwise you wouldn't go to them. And think about that. Like for me, I feel like the lecture form has to be defended. And I feel like it has to be reasserted. It has to be prioritized. And it has to come from people who are underprivileged and marginalized and excluded by the system, because the people who are privileged and centered by that system feel guilty and they don't know what to do with that guilt. And then they try to like, oh, we'll just flip the classroom around and we'll just do things however. And that is not going to work for us, because we can't on the factory floor or the Amazon warehouse or the delivery truck get much from people just talking in a recording. We actually need someone to bring some structure to the anarchy of facts. We need that. Against the anarchy of facts, we also go against the anarchy of signs. And so to go back over this with my exegesis now, speech, though this is the sentence before, but I do want to say it. Speech disenchants. For the speaking being guarantees his own apparition, which is to say appearance. He guarantees his own appearance and comes to the assistance of himself, attends his own manifestation. His being is brought about in this attendance. It's the person who's trying to take responsibility for how they are received, which is to say, they want to be understood. And then they say something, and then they have to clarify what they said because they were misunderstood. And so they refine their approach to speaking to try to fine-tune it to their concrete others in the classroom. That is this attendance to his own manifestation. I am attending in this lecture role, this performance, this play, this ruse. I'm performing a play of being this master. It's just a game, guys. But at the same time, like, we can play this game. And insofar as I'm doing that, I am attending the manifestation of this appearance. Now, obviously, I had to think about how the OBS setup appears and how the Zoom appears and how to get us all here in a room. That's administrative and technological conditions of possibility that do actually come back on me in terms of me attending my own manifestation with you all in a way that a professor doesn't have to think about because that's all been taken care of by the administration, right? Well, no, but I have to attend to my own manifestation by saying everything that I say in different ways. I have to attend to my own manifestation by saying it in a way that I think a person who's read this book a lot of times is going to go, yeah, that's what it is. But then also going, okay. But now I got to assume that you have no idea what any of that means. Now let me reiterate in plain speak, and then we'll go back and forth between these two, like we'll zoom in, we'll zoom out. Okay. We'll zoom in, we'll zoom out, we'll repeat. Well, that's attending to the manifestation of your meaning through language, through speech, through communion with the other. I'm taking responsibility for that attendance. And it's that responsibility to attend to your meaning that is so often a part of writer's block, because you are trying to communicate with someone, but then you're like, but who am I trying to write to? And I want to say it this way, but that'll be taken that other way. And then I give up. I have writer's block. No, you have audience block. You have responsibility for attending to your own manifestation blockage. You're all tied into knots because there's not just one other. You're all tied into knots because there's a bunch of them. You're all tied into knots because there's writing to the big other, which is either academic or attention economy, some kind of post-class fractured mass consumer demographic and its norms that you could write to. Or there's this academic sort of field-specific norm that you could write to. You could try to write to both, or you could try to write to the people in the room, the people that you know for a fact are going to read you. And then there's the problem of audience capture and preaching to the choir and only talking to a certain kind of person, right? That ties us into pretzels, feeling torn in all those different directions and not being able to just take stabs in the dark, try our hand at it, risk failure, fuck up, be imperfect, and allow the saying to overflow the said. And people who don't realize that the saying is overflowing the said and that you as a living, breathing human being are going to attend to your manifestation and clean up any misperceptions later after you've said your piece, well, fuck them. That's what I say. Because you either understand a person is not reducible to a sentence on the page and that they are a living, breathing person who continues the saying, who continues to say it in different ways, who has the possibility of coming to, attending to his or her own manifestation. You either get that, or hopefully you will later. But we don't have time for that, right? We don't have time for that. And I know that, like, if you've been through the academic system, then, and if you've been through the schooling system as well, you know, prior to college, well, it's like business writing. It's like business writing. It's like writing to the generic peer. It's writing to the big other. It's writing to your boss. It's writing to administrators. And of course, that is a way of attending to your manifestation. And of course, within certain contexts, that's important. What does it mean to do underground theory, though? What does it mean to actually write it? Like, that's a big question. We have to think about this. Well, this attending to your own manifestation runs exactly against this tendency to read a text in a way that doesn't take seriously the author. So even if I might someday disagree with Levinas on this, this is his position. And it's not just on this page. There's a bunch of pages that relate to this very issue. His being is brought about in this attendance, the speech, which already dawns in the face that looks at me looking. So there's a face that looks at me looking, introduces the primary frankness of revelation. There's a blunt honesty or authenticity that comes from responding to somebody who's curious, like, what? What did you say? And you're revealing something, but you're the revealer and you're attending to that revelation. In function of it, the world is oriented. That is, takes on signification. In function of the word, the world commences. The world commences in function of the word. What does that mean? In function of the word, the world commences, which is not equivalent to the formula, the world issues in speech. Did I changed pages, guys. Did I really? Wait, is this the one? Is this the same? I'm on the same page.
No,
Oh, no, yeah.
six.
I tried to turn back to page 96. I ended up on page 98. Like I told you all last week, he always repeats himself every page and a half. It's literally happening right here. So if you look at the very middle of page 98, which is where I was going to turn to after 96, he says the exact same thing in a different way. Okay. And so for right now, I'm going to go ahead and reread page 96 because that's where we were. I started reading some shit that's not on page 96. I'm sorry, but it's very complimentary. So anyway, the sign does not signify the signifier as it signifies the signified. Okay. You should all remember, or maybe you've seen somewhere, that the sign is made up of the signifier and the signified. The signifier is the word on the page, or it's the word spoken by the voice, right? It's the word tree. That's the signifier. And the signified is the concept of tree. They're not the same thing, because you could call the tree a looby-doo and you'd still be talking about the same concept, the concept of tree, right? Well, whether we call it a looby-doo or tree or bomb, right? It doesn't matter. But he's saying the sign does not signify the signifier as it signifies the signified. There's an order of priority here that he wants to establish, and it makes a radical break with Saussurean linguistics. He says the signified is never a complete presence. Well, yeah, that makes sense, right? The concept is never a complete presence, right? The word is a complete presence. You can totalize it in your vision by reading it on the page. But the actual signified, the concept, that's going to escape complete presence, of course. He says, always a sign in its turn. It does not come in a straightforward frankness. Okay. Well, the signified, the concept, is itself a sign, meaning it's going to have its own. There's an infinite regress here in language, where you take a thing, it's got its signifier, it's signified, and then you say, okay, but let's really nail down the signified itself, and in so doing, you've got to turn it into a sign, and you're going to keep trying to nail it down, and there's going to be this sort of infinite regress. So it's always a sign in its turn. It does not, the concept, the signified, does not come in a straightforward frankness. It's not just blunt and obvious. When I say the other lowercase, or I say the hot dog, it doesn't mean, it's like, yeah, you might think you know what I mean, but I might have something specific in mind. And is that hot dog actually a sandwich? Like, fuck, does it come with relish and onions? How about ketchup and mustard? What about barbecue sauce and mayonnaise? Right? Like, there's a lot of ways what about lettuce on that thing? How about somebody throw some cheese on top and runs it through the oven? There's a lot of different things that could be going on there. And it's not frank. It's not obvious. It's not blunt. It's not straightforward. We don't have immediate access to it. Right? He says the signifier, and now this is where it goes crazy. He who emits the sign. Oh, shit. Well, if we were reading this just as Saussurean linguists, the signifier is just the word on the page. The signifier is just the word tree, the word hot dog, the word other. But no, the signifier is a he. The signifier emits the sign, speaks the word, writes the word, says the thing that I'm saying is actually this. I know we normally call it tree, but I'm calling it a looby-doo. I think Mikey uses Zuki Lug. I'm just doing it different, but yeah, looby-doo. He says, he who emits the sign faces. Now this is important because, like, we say that the signifier tree points at the concept tree. And Levinas is saying the signifier is the other person, and the other person is pointing at the tree. So the signifier is the actual other person who's going to attend to his manifestation, as we saw on the next page, on 2 pages later. He says, he who emits the sign faces, despite the interposition of the sign, without proposing himself as a theme. So it's like, I can sit here and I can go, okay, so this is how the car engine works. That runs to that, and this does this, and that's that. And nowhere in the process am I having to say, and this is who I am, and this is what I care about, or whatever. No, it's presupposed. It's presupposed that you're there, right? But, you can turn yourself into the theme. You can start to speak of yourself, but announcing yourself in that speech act turns you into the signified now. And now that infinite regress is going to apply to you. He says, and consequently, as a sign in its turn. So you posit yourself as the signified because you're writing a memoir. Well, now you have become a sign, meaning that there's not just the concept of you, but there's all the ways of pointing to you. So it just opens up this fractal of pointing. He says, no, the signifier, manifests himself in speech by speaking of the world and not of himself. He manifests himself by proposing the world, by thematizing it. And this is where I got into talking about the gift. The teacher has a gift. If you were to just word search gift throughout this book, it's going to appear a lot of times within the context of what I just said, even though he doesn't say it right there on the page. All right. And it's because thematization is your way of gifting another. Now, of course, it could be a way of doing rhetorical ruse and just fucking with people and manipulating people, sure. But no, he's saying, no, in the genuine teaching relationship, this thing happens. Okay, so on 98, right in the middle, speech disenchants, for the speaking being guarantees his own apparition and comes to the assistance of himself, attends his own manifestation. His being is brought about in this attendance. And I've already attended to myself here. I had to go ahead and say, oh my God, I was reading from page 98. I meant 96. And, well, I'm having to clarify in the middle of speak. In the middle of speaking, my saying is needing to be corrected and stipulated. That is me attending to this manifestation, right? Then he says, the speech which already dawns in the face that looks at me looking introduces the primary frankness of revelation. On the previous page, he had said that the signified does not come in a straightforward frankness. And on this page, he's saying that there is a primary frankness, and that is of the fact of revelation itself. A signifier is signifying some signified. And that signifier is not just a word, it's a human fucking being pointing. Okay? In function of it, the world is oriented, that is, takes on signification. Let's say we couldn't orient ourselves in the world. There would be no up and down and left from right and north from south if it wasn't for the fact that we have ways of comprehending, classifying, categorizing, situating ourselves via language. The instruments of language give us our placement in the world. As Lacan says, like ants, they all work together. They have something, maybe we could call it language, maybe not. We don't know. Seems like it's not what we would call language. We have to use language to work together. The ants, it seems like they're able to just do what they do together. Who knows? Maybe I'm overcomplicating it by bringing him into the picture. It doesn't matter. Never mind that. He says, in function of the world commences, which is not equivalent to the formula the world issues in speech. In function of the world commences, which is not equivalent to the formula the world issues in speech. Well, to say that the world issues in speech, what does that mean? Is that similar to saying that language is the house of being? Is it similar to saying that everything is like a language? Is it similar to saying that everything functions like a language? Is it similar to, I don't know who he's pointing at or who he's combating or what that French saying is. And I'd be very curious to hear from Terence, the world issues in speech. Is that something that sounds an awful lot like any of his contemporaries or something that they would say? I don't know, but let's just take it to be language is the house of being. Let's just take it to be we are all split by language and we're the puppets of language. We're kind of like we are being spoken by language. Let's take it to be something like that. And he's saying, no, in function of the world commences. commences. But the word is a function of what? A signifier as a human being that is pointing. And that has precedence because that comes from this face-to-face relationship. And then there's some interesting stuff below that I put question marks beside. You can all hyper obsess over this paragraph and hopefully come prepared to talk about it on Thursday or Friday. It's at the point that we get to this page. It says, the world is said, and hence can be a theme, can be proposed, right? For sure. The entry of beings into a proposition constitutes the original event of their taking on signification, right? That's taking on signification, taking on meaning. The possibility of their algorithmic expression itself will be established on this basis. What does he mean by algorithmic expression? I have no fucking idea, but if you want to write about AI and Levinas, I recommend that you try to see if you can possibly tease out of this some kind of necessary relationship. And if you can't, then go ahead and express why. I want to know. I'm not sure. I want to hyper obsess over that. I can't. So I'm saying, please come prepared on Thursday or Friday. Then he says, speech is thus the origin of all signification, of tools and all human works. Heidegger, right? Speech is thus the origin of the referential totalities of equipment, okay? Heidegger, that's what he's saying. For through it, the referential system from which every signification arises receives the very principle of its functioning, its key. The human other saying and pointing, that is prior to the storehouse of tools and all of their ultimate for the sakes of witches. Okay. I'm not going to go much longer, but I want to go to page 100 here and look in the very middle. He says, one may call it a disclosure of what is revealed, the experience of a face, but one thus conjures away the originality of this disclosure. In this disclosure, there disappears precisely the consciousness of solitary certitude in which every knowing is enacted, even that one can have a face. Now, he's playing on this question of certitude because he was arguing with Descartes earlier, saying that there is something more important than the ability to doubt the existence of the world, and that is the fact that the self, being sure of itself, can still be called into question by the other. So the other calling oneself into question is primary to the I think because I doubt. Therefore, Descartes, the other is more sure than the self, right? This disclosure, I'm going to start. He says, one may call it a disclosure of what is revealed, the experience of a face, but one thus conjures away the originality of the disclosure. So, for Heidegger, everything's about disclosure in the light of being and the clearing. And he's saying that, yeah, but that conjures out or like eclipses or forecloses or conceals. It conceals something while at the same time revealing something. What does it conceal? It conceals the originality of the disclosure itself. In this disclosure, in the speech act, in the communication, the interlocutor interjecting themselves into the relationship. In this disclosure, there disappears precisely the consciousness of solitary certitude, being completely sure that you exist because you doubt and therefore you think. Right? This solitary certitude goes right along with interiority and dwelling and being at home and being self-engrossed, self-fulfilled. Right? The disclosure of the other as signifier ruptures or breaches, to use his term from part 2 of part A, breaches that totality. Then he says, certitude rests in fact on my freedom. And in this sense, yeah, it's solitary. Yeah, but it's that other breaching that totality that calls you into question in the first place. On the following page, on 101, he says that this is because we are in a moral relation with a master who judges me. He says that that relationship of the master who judges me subtends the freedom of my adherence to the true. Right? My need to adhere to the true, to say, okay, it's true. I have no justified reason to believe that a teapot is circling Saturn or that unicorns exist, right? Like, well, it's because there is ultimately a judge who you feel responsible to. Reason is a response to that judge. Reason is a striving to satisfy that judge and get that judge to come out on your side, probably. But the point is before trying to satisfy that judgment or get it to come out in your favor, there's this locus of what he calls truth in society, the possibility of coming to agreement in the first place. It's not just like a schizophrenic, whatever I want in my head, and you've got whatever you want in your head, and maybe we jive, maybe we don't. No. The very notion of objectivity is something downstream from the fact that there are concrete others, and if you talk a certain way, after a certain point, they're going to say, you're not serious. I'm not going to waste my time. And then you're going to go, fuck, back to the drawing board. I need to get better at this communication thing, at attending to my own manifestation. He says, the moral relation with the master who judges me subtends, which is to say undergirds, or is the foundation of the freedom of my adherence to the true. Freedom of adherence to the true means you don't have to say what's true. You don't, just because this marker is real doesn't mean that you have to agree with me. You could just be like, no, it's not. It's not real. It's not there. You have the freedom to kind of not adhere to the true, right? He says, thus language commences. That means this face-to-face relationship is the origin of what we call language. Thus language commences. It begins. He who speaks to me and across the words proposes himself to me, retains the fundamental foreignness of the other who judges me. Our relations are never reversible. This is what I was getting at on page 35 when he's saying that these terms are not reversible. And you'll notice that there's an uppercase O, other here who judges me, not a lowercase o, other who judges me. And that's why these relations are not reversible. Yeah, but if you go back to page 35 and it's all lowercase, those terms aren't reversible. Okay, the point is whether it's uppercase O, other, or lowercase, the concept of the other, it doesn't matter. The terms are never reversible because the metaphysician, insofar as he or she is being a metaphysician, is trying to understand exteriority, is in a subservient relation because in a sort of sense, you're accountable to the judges. There's a courtroom for reason. Of course, in the post-class fractured mass with all of these different big others, there's a lot of courthouses, there's a lot of courtrooms, there's a lot of different judges. Most of them have schizophrenia. The other ones just want to fucking kill you. Like, I don't know, like you're kind of fucked. Which is why we got to get back to basics, which is this face-to-face relationship. I think there's really important additional quotations that traces out this theme of teaching and surplus and judgment and accountability and response to that being called into question all throughout this week's reading. I want you to pay attention to that, and I hope that you'll enjoy it because I think it's fucking awesome. And there's a lot that I haven't gotten to here today. And if you want to see me go page after page and focus on what I take to be the most important thing that I could understand on the page, I'm going to do that on Thursday. And then on Friday, we're going to have a bit more of a discussion format where Terrence is our master. Okay? And if you don't think that Terrence is a certified magisterial being in this, community, that's okay. But play the believing game, put him in that position, because all of us should at some point get a turn to play that role. And I think he should get that turn to play that role, considering the fact that he's been studying French theory for 40 years. So I'm going to go ahead and put him in that position. On Friday, I'll get to consult with him, hopefully with you all. But if you're not present, maybe get your questions into the forum ahead of time. Questions about translation, interpretation, questions about method, questions about specific pages, specific sections, specific words. Get those into the forum ahead of time so we can talk about them as we get to them on the page while we're working our way through my notes on Thursday. And then on Friday, we'll be really ready to kind of sit down with Terrence and actually get into it. And that's kind of how it's all coming together. And I'm really excited because I'm starting to see how the rest of this month is going to go. And it's, it's kind of intense, for those of you who are just doing the tip. You have last week's lecture and this lecture and then 2 more lectures, and that's pretty much all you got to worry about. You can do the preface if you like, but for those of us who are going into the deep end, it's a lot of hours you're going to spend reading this with yourself, doing exegeticals with one another, and going over notes, and then sitting and thinking about translation with Terrence. It's a lot. And I would say that this is like the first stretch of a marathon. And it's that stretch where you really shouldn't be thinking about how many pages you have to read. You really shouldn't be thinking about the distance that you have to run. You really shouldn't be worrying too much about how much. Follow inspiration and trust the process and give yourself some grace because there's lots of room to do this in different ways. And that's it. Like that's all I really have to say. I'm fucking stoked about what we're going to do this Thursday and Friday. But with that, it's over. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. All right. In keeping with how this went last time, I actually think I'm going to go ahead and just cut it off right now. And I want people to be able to stay and talk, which is why I'm not going to close out of this call. I'm going to actually just leave it open for whoever wants to stay and talk. I'll stick around for a minute to go over any questions. I'm going to encourage if Nance wants to hang around for like a little bit to do a little bit of a recording or something, but I want everyone to have the ability to record in the near future. So if you haven't seen the tutorial that I did with Cesar, please go watch it and set up OBS. It's as simple as setting up any other kind of software. You're not a fucking grandma. You know how to do this. And by know how to do this, I mean, you know how to learn. And if you come up with some good questions about some problem you're running into, we can fine tune and get a better tutorial. But I'm starting to think like you can't be a real Theory Underground person or participant just after today. I wasn't thinking this before today, but I'm starting to think coming equipped means having the book, having a paper and pen so you can take notes, preferably having done the reading, but maybe not, it doesn't matter. But knowing how to use OBS so that if you are taking lead on the recording responsibility in one of the breakout rooms, it's going to be good. You'll be able to do it. We'll be an elite team of people who are able to disperse into 10 different rooms, and every one of those rooms can be recorded and added into the forum. Just imagine, in 45 minutes, we could produce 10 hours of content. All right there, boom, done. And all of us got to say what we actually wanted to say. And one weirdo who we respect and appreciate so much is going to actually be obsessive enough to go through all of it. But it's there. It's at least it was done and we did it, right? Now, for now, there's not that many of us, and so we don't even have to worry about it. But the thing I'm worried about is having at least 2, preferably 3 people who are here who are able to record what goes on in that breakout room. And then that person will upload it to a YouTube channel. I don't care if you make a new YouTube channel and keep it all a secret and keep it all unlisted, or if you put it out publicly on your channel, the 5 billion Nances or whatever. I don't care. Like, just make it accessible to the people you did it with. And for this stuff, it can be public. I don't care. I guess in this case, we should probably go ahead and double check with people who are present, Nance. But at least make it accessible for people who are in the Totality and Infinity Discord. And with that, I'm going to close out. Thank you, everybody.
We cannot do direct revolution, but the only way to lay the foundation for it is to do what you are doing to move the underground. It's a theoretically correct title.
Welcome to Theory Underground, a place for workers with earbuds who are tired of letting others read and think on their behalf, slipstreaming our way into an understanding of the situation that short-circuits the deadlocks of our moment.
Research at Theory Underground focuses on what is most important for understanding our current situation: theory of the subject, capital, time-energy theory, critical media theory, CMT, and the most essential critiques necessary for understanding why the theory, ideology, and common sense of influencers left to right misses the mark.
Theory Underground is coming to a city near you. What that has meant in the last year is traveling across the United States, into Canada, and then all over Europe to promote our books, courses, and ideas related to time energy and underground theory. You've been reading Underground Theory.
I'm a publisher and an editor. I run and review books. Literally, it's my living. This is the best edited collection I've ever read.
Okay, picture this scene. America, early 2021. An Amazon warehouse worker arises from the emerging underground theory internet scene to create spaces for untimely topics and concerns that are too often neglected or kept in isolation today. Joined by a revolving cast of underground theorists, academics, and critics, he establishes what will become Theory Underground, a teaching, research, and publishing platform by and for working-class intellectuals, autodidacts, and academics who want to do more than they're able to do within the confines of academia. That warehouse worker's name is David McKerracher, and his book Timenergy is his first major contribution to the world of theory. It was recently reprinted with a foreword by none other than Slavoj Žižek, who also contributed to Theory Underground's latest book.
My Bible, it's an excellent book.
A collection of essays called Underground Theory.
What you just heard is an excerpt from the Strange Exiles podcast, episode 23, where Bram from Strange Exiles interviewed me and Mikey. For those who don't know, Mikey is the author of the Dangerous Maybe blog. We are publishing one of his books here shortly at Theory Underground. He's also a lecturer at Theory Underground, and he's someone I've been friends and a collaborator with for over 10 years. But most importantly for you all, he's a fantastic lecturer, and it's a crime that he has to do wage labor right now. One of the long-term goals of Theory Underground has been now for a couple of years to hashtag free Mikey. That is something that I've been really pushing, but first I had to get freed from wage labor, which was achieved this year. That's right. Thanks to my monthly seminar subscribers, I was able to quit Amazon and do Theory Underground full time. Now I'm announcing the next big phase of the plan, which is the Mikey Down seminar. What monthly subscribers to the Mikey seminar are paying for is a survey of philosophy, including deep dives into Žižek, Land, Lacan, Baudrillard, Bataille, Lyotard, and ultimately the whole history of philosophy.
We're trying to build like this ongoing seminar, right? And that's what I really like about this thing, where, you know, if I'm teaching a main text, that's something I got to focus on. I got to really, but the seminar thing, we can do this stuff all the time, where we dive deeper into concepts, we dive deeper into certain, you know, sections of books or whatever, and we can really do this nuanced stuff.
I think that there's probably no better way for us to accelerate our learning in these areas than by slipstreaming Mikey. And that has been my belief for years and years and years now. It's official. You're able to help out. You're able to get involved. You're able to benefit directly from liberating him from wage labor. Get on it right now. Do it. Just go. Stop what you're doing. Go click the button, subscribe. This is what you do. Subscribe to him. If you're already signed up for the ongoing Theory Underground seminars, then that's the ones that I do with my wife, Anne. Though that's getting an upgrade, which means that I will be doing one session per month that is just me, and then I will also be doing the ones with Anne, which are a crash course in sociology, anthropology, the social sciences, and ultimately Marx, Heidegger, Levinas, Bourdieu, imminently critiquing pop psychology, sociology, self-help, and ultimately the doxa of our time. But if you would like to be a subscriber to both Mikey's seminar and the seminar that the Snellgrove McKerrachers are doing, then the best way is to become a Tier 4 subscriber, or you can be a Tier 2 subscriber to each of us. The reason this matters is because Tier 2 is like pretty much the best bang for your buck. It gives you huge discounts on all of the courses that we do. But if you can't afford it, Tier 4 is amazing because it gives you Tier 3 access at both Mikey's seminar and ours.
And finally, not everybody has time to be part of these ongoing research seminars, and they just want to fund the paid content for the YouTube and podcast. And so thank you so much to our patrons over at Patreon. They're the ones funding all the free stuff. So big thank you to Bert, Marilyn, Carl, Sahil, Zozandra, Nikolai, Darian, Tyler, and Mandeep, and all the other wonderful patron people. Patreon people. And thank you to all the other wonderful Patreon people. Thank you so much to all of you patrons, and also to the special subscribers and the paying subscribers. Oh my god, it's just so awkward. Thank you, patrons. Thank you. Okay. And to all the other wonderful patrons, thank you so much, all you patrons. And also a special thanks to the subscribers on the YouTube side, as well as the paying subscribers over at Substack. Why can't we do this? Fuck. You guys, just thank you. Thank you, everyone, for making this bullshit possible. Thank you to the subscribers. You did so good. Thanks, guys.